It is 3 in the morning. The house is still, wrapped in a profound quiet that only exists in the deepest hours of the night. But in your mind, a storm is raging. The screen of your awareness is filled with a chaotic slideshow of tomorrow's to-do lists, yesterday's regrets, conversations you wish you had handled differently, and a vague, persistent anxiety about the future. It is a silent kind of exhaustion, a hidden weight that you carry even into your sleep, or what should be your sleep. You are not alone in this. This experience, this feeling of being overwhelmed in the quietest moments, is not a personal failure. It is a symptom of our time. We live in a world that worships busyness, a civilization that constantly measures our worth by our productivity, our achievements, and our possessions. We are bombarded with noise, not just from the world outside, but from the devices in our pockets. Each notification a small demand on our attention, our most precious and finite resource. We have been taught how to conquer the external world, how to build careers, how to accumulate things, how to present a perfect life online. But we were never taught how to navigate our own inner world. No one gave us a map for the vast, often turbulent, landscape of our own minds. And so, we feel a deep thirst, a longing for a peace that materialism cannot buy and achievements cannot provide. But what if there was another way, an ancient path, walked by millions before us, not as a religion that demands blind faith, but as a gentle science of the mind, a practical art of living? This is an invitation to explore that path, to discover the wisdom of the Buddhist tradition as a source of profound, practical guidance. Think of it not as a flood of new rules or dogmas, but as a soft and steady rain, a gentle Dharma rain that falls without force, soaking slowly into the dry, compacted soil of the soul, with the power to soothe the anxious heart and to wash away the deep-rooted afflictions of modern life. It is a path that begins not with a leap of faith, but with a single, simple, conscious breath. Our journey begins not by adding something new, but by noticing what is already here. And what is here, in our modern world, is noise. It is a constant, pervasive hum that forms the soundtrack of our lives. It is the literal sound of traffic, of construction, of televisions in the next room. But more than that, it is a digital noise, a relentless cascade of information and stimulation. It is the chime of a new email, the buzz of a text message, the seductive, infinite scroll of a social media feed. It is the 24-hour news cycle, delivering crises and controversies from around the globe directly into our nervous systems. It is the silent pressure of 1,000 unread articles, 100 unanswered messages, an endless stream of content designed, with breathtaking efficiency, to do one thing, and one thing only, to capture and hold your attention. This is not an accident. We are living in the midst of a silent, undeclared war, a battle for the territory of your awareness. In this war, your attention is the prize. It is the most valuable commodity in the 21st century, a resource more precious than gold or oil. And every day, sophisticated algorithms and brilliant engineers are working to mine it from you, to extract it, to monetize it. They have learned to speak the language of our deepest psychological triggers, our need for validation, our fear of missing out, our craving for novelty. Each notification, each like, each shocking headline is a carefully crafted hook designed to pull our minds away from where we are and into a digital space where our attention can be sold. The result is a state of perpetual fragmentation. Our minds are scattered across a dozen different windows, both on our screens and in our heads. We are physically present in one place, having a conversation with a loved one, but our minds are elsewhere, worrying about a work email, replaying a past argument, or planning the future. We are never fully here. And this constant state of division, this internal scattering, is profoundly exhausting. It depletes our energy, diminishes our capacity for deep thought, and robs our experiences of their richness and meaning. We give our attention away in small, thoughtless increments all day long, and we wonder why, at the end of the day, we feel so empty, so drained, so fundamentally dissatisfied. We have given away the very currency of our life. For where you place your attention is where you place your life. What you pay attention to grows. And for many of us, what we are growing, inadvertently, is a garden of distraction, anxiety, and shallow connection. In the face of this relentless noise, we develop a deep craving for its opposite, for silence. But we have come to misunderstand what silence truly is. We often think of silence as an absence, a void, a boring and uncomfortable emptiness that needs to be filled. We turn on the television the moment we walk into an empty house. We put in earbuds the moment we step outside. The prospect of sitting alone with our own thoughts, without a screen to mediate the experience, can feel intimidating, even terrifying. But the wisdom of this path teaches us that true silence is not an empty space. It is a full one. It is not a void, but a sanctuary. It is the canvas upon which the masterpiece of a conscious life can be painted. It is the rich, dark, fertile soil from which clarity, insight, and genuine peace can finally sprout. The constant noise of the world is like a diet of sugar and caffeine for the mind. It provides a temporary rush, a fleeting sense of engagement, but it offers no real nourishment. Silence, on the other hand, is the wholesome food our souls are starving for. It is only in the stillness that we can begin to hear the subtle, essential whispers of our own heart, the voice of our own intuition that has been drowned out by the shouting of the world. There is an old story that speaks to this truth. It tells of a great king who possessed immense wealth and power. He had everything a person could desire: palaces and gardens, silks and jewels, armies and servants. Yet, he had no peace. His mind was always restless, agitated by the endless demands of his kingdom and the ceaseless chatter of his own thoughts. He became convinced that the source of his turmoil was the noise of the world. So, he issued a decree, offering a vast reward to anyone who could find for him a place of perfect, absolute silence. His subjects searched the kingdom high and low. They brought him to the highest mountain peak, but there he could hear the wind whistling through the rocks. They took him to the deepest desert, but there he could hear the shifting of the sand and the beating of his own heart. They even built a soundproof chamber for him, deep beneath his palace, but in the thick, oppressive quiet, the noise inside his own head became a deafening roar. Frustrated and defeated, the king was ready to give up. One day, a wise old hermit who had heard of the king's quest came to the palace. He did not offer the king a new location. Instead, he said, "Your Majesty, I can show you a place of profound silence, but you must trust me. We must go to the loudest, most chaotic place in your entire kingdom." The king, skeptical but desperate, agreed. The hermit led him not to a remote wilderness, but directly into the heart of the city's main marketplace at midday. The noise was overwhelming. Merchants were shouting, children were crying, animals were bleating, hammers were clanging on anvils. The king was furious. "Is this some kind of joke?" he yelled over the din. "This is the opposite of what I seek." The hermit simply smiled and motioned for the king to follow him to a small, quiet corner behind a stall. "Now, Your Majesty," the hermit said softly, "do not try to block out the noise. Do not fight it. Simply close your eyes and listen, not to any one sound, but to the entire symphony of sounds. Let it all wash over you. And while you listen to the world outside, bring just a small part of your attention to the feeling of your own breath, entering and leaving your body. Reluctantly, the king did as he was told. At first, his mind resisted, jumping from sound to sound, judging and labeling everything. But as he gently persisted, following the hermit's instruction, something remarkable began to happen. By allowing the noise to be there without resisting it, and by anchoring a small part of his awareness in the simple, steady rhythm of his breath, the external chaos began to lose its power over him. The sounds were still there, as loud as ever, but they no longer felt like an assault. They became just a texture, a backdrop, and in the space he created by not fighting, by not resisting, he discovered a small, unshakable point of stillness deep within himself. It had been there all along, buried beneath his frantic search. He opened his eyes and looked at the hermit with tears of gratitude. He had not needed to change the world. He had only needed to change his relationship to it. He had found his silence, not in a soundproof room, but in the very heart of the storm. This is the first step on our path together. It is an invitation to become like that king. You do not need a special cushion or a silent monastery. All you need is 5 minutes. Right where you are, you can undertake this simple, profound practice. Find a comfortable place to sit, on a chair or on the floor. You can close your eyes gently or simply lower your gaze. You do not need to do anything. Your only task is to notice. Notice the sounds around you without needing to name them or judge them. Notice the feeling of the air on your skin. And then, just like the king, gently bring your awareness to the physical sensation of your breath. Feel the air entering your nostrils, filling your lungs. Feel your belly rise and fall. When your mind wanders, and it will, simply notice where it has gone, without criticism, and gently, kindly, guide it back to the breath. That is all. This is not about achieving a state of blissful emptiness. It is about the simple, courageous act of showing up for your own life for 5 minutes. It is about discovering that you, too, can find a point of stillness, a quiet sanctuary that exists right here in the middle of your own noisy, beautiful, chaotic life. For in this newfound quiet, we begin to notice something else, a subtle but persistent hum of dissatisfaction that comes not from the world outside, but from deep within our own hearts. This brings us face to face with a fundamental truth of our existence. As the external noise begins to quiet, and we sit for a few moments in the sanctuary of our own attention, we inevitably come face to face with the internal noise. It is a more subtle, and often more disturbing, sound. It is a low-grade hum of restlessness, a feeling that something is not quite right, a background radiation of anxiety. This feeling is so constant, so familiar, that for most of our lives, we don't even notice it is there. We simply assume it is the price of being alive. The Buddhist tradition gives this feeling a name. The name is dukkha. This word, dukkha, is often translated into English as suffering. But this single word is too heavy, too dramatic, to capture its full meaning. It is like describing the ocean with only the word wet. While dukkha certainly includes the sharp, undeniable pain of grief, sickness, and loss, its meaning is far broader and more nuanced. It points to that pervasive sense of unsatisfactoriness we just described. It's the itch you can't quite scratch. It's the feeling of being fundamentally unsettled. It is the human condition of perpetual wanting and the subtle disappointment that follows even when we get what we want. The Buddha, in his first great teaching, did not begin with a story of gods or a theory of creation. He began as a great physician would. He began with a diagnosis, and that diagnosis was dukkha. This is the first noble truth. It is the simple, honest, and courageous acknowledgement that to be a sentient being is to experience dukkha in its many forms. It is essential to understand that this is a diagnosis, not a judgment. It is not a pessimistic declaration that life is miserable and everything is hopeless. It is the opposite. Imagine you have been feeling unwell for years, with a collection of strange and troubling symptoms. You go from doctor to doctor, but no one can tell you what is wrong. You begin to think it's all in your head, that you are weak or flawed. Then, finally, you meet a wise physician who listens carefully, runs the right tests, and gives you a clear, precise diagnosis. In that moment, you don't feel despair. You feel a profound sense of relief. Finally, someone understands. Finally, the problem has a name. And because it has a name, a cure can be found. Acknowledging dukkha is exactly like this. It is an act of supreme realism and profound self-compassion. It is looking squarely at our own lives and the lives of those around us, and admitting, with honesty and without shame, that there is a fundamental challenge we all face. It is the brave first step out of denial and towards genuine healing. To understand our diagnosis more clearly, the physician of the mind points out that dukkha comes in three distinct, though often overlapping, forms. The first is the most obvious, the dukkha of painful experience. This is what we typically mean by suffering. It is the pain of a migraine headache, the agony of a broken bone, the deep sorrow of losing a loved one. It is the anxiety that keeps us awake at night, the sting of betrayal, the frustration of failure. This form of dukkha is universal and undeniable. No amount of wealth, power, or positive thinking can make a person immune to sickness, old age, death, and loss. It is a given of the human experience. The second form is more subtle. It is the dukkha of change. This is the suffering that arises from the fact that even pleasant experiences are impermanent. Think of a perfect, beautiful sunset. It is a moment of joy and wonder, but woven into that very joy is a thread of sadness, because we know it cannot last. The colors will fade, the sun will disappear, and the night will come. This is the dukkha of change. It is the feeling of emptiness after a wonderful vacation has ended. It is the bittersweet taste of nostalgia for a happy time that is gone forever. It is the anxiety that can creep in, even at a moment of triumph, the quiet fear that this, too, shall pass. Our suffering arises not from the change itself, but from our resistance to it. We try to cling to happiness, to grasp it and hold it tight, like trying to hold a handful of water. But life is a river, not a stone. By its very nature, it flows and changes, and our attempt to make it stand still is a primary source of our frustration and disappointment. The third form is the most profound. It is the dukkha of conditioned existence. This is that background hum, that baseline level of unsatisfactoriness that is woven into the very fabric of being a separate self in a complex world. It is the inherent unreliability of life. It's the feeling that even when things are going well, there is an underlying fragility to it all. It is the restlessness that prompts us to check our phone for the 10th time in an hour, seeking a little hit of stimulation. It is the vague emptiness that settles in after we finally get the promotion we worked so hard for, or buy the car we dreamed of, only to find that the happiness it provides is fleeting. And the wanting mind soon starts looking for its next target. It is the quiet despair that comes from scrolling through social media, comparing our messy, real life with the curated, perfect highlight reels of others. This is Sankhara Dukkha. It is the friction of being a finite, vulnerable self in a world we cannot ultimately control. The Buddha told a powerful story to illustrate the urgency of addressing this condition directly. A man is walking through the forest when he is shot by an arrow coated in a deadly poison. His friends and family rush to his side, and they find a surgeon who is ready to remove the arrow immediately. But the wounded man stops him. "Wait," he says. "Before you take out the arrow, I need to know certain things. I must know the name of the man who shot me. I need to know what caste he belongs to, whether he is tall or short, and what village he comes from. I must know what kind of wood the bow was made from, and what kind of sinew was used for the bowstring. I must know what kind of bird the feathers on the arrow came from." The Buddha asks his disciples, "What would happen to this man?" They reply, "He would surely die before he ever got the answers to his questions. We," the Buddha explained, "are that man. The arrow of dukkha has struck us all. The poison of dissatisfaction is coursing through us, and yet we spend our lives distracted by metaphysical questions. We say, 'I will not begin to live a more conscious life until I know for certain whether the universe is eternal or not, whether there is a God, what happens after death.' We get lost in endless analysis, speculation, and debate. But all the while, the arrow remains lodged in our flesh. The path begins with the profound practical wisdom to say, the most important thing right now is to pull out the arrow. Let us deal with the immediate reality of our own discontent. Let us address the cause of our restlessness and our anxiety. The speculative questions can wait. Healing cannot. To acknowledge dukkha is to finally turn your attention to the arrow. It is to give the surgeon permission to begin their work. It is an act of radical sanity in a world that encourages us to ignore our wounds. By facing this truth, we are not succumbing to despair. We are opening the door to hope. We have made the diagnosis. Now, our journey can turn to its cause. Having faced the diagnosis of dukkha, that pervasive hum of unsatisfactoriness in our lives, the wise physician of the mind now takes the next logical step. A diagnosis is incomplete without an understanding of the cause. If we are to find a cure for our dis-ease, we must look directly at the root from which it grows. The second noble truth offers this etiology, a clear and profound insight into the origin of our discontent. The origin, the Buddha taught, is a force within us called tanha. This ancient Pali word is often translated as craving or desire, but its essence is more akin to a deep and burning thirst. It is the unquenchable thirst of the ego, the relentless drive of the self to be satisfied, to be secure, to be permanent. Tanha is the engine of dukkha. It is the restless energy that keeps us seeking, grasping, and ultimately suffering. This thirst is not a simple, straightforward impulse. It operates with a deceptive logic, a repeating cycle that defines much of our waking life. It begins with a feeling of lack, a sense that something is missing. This feeling of lack is uncomfortable, so the mind immediately starts searching for something outside of itself to fill the void. It fixates on an object, a person, an experience, or an idea, and a belief arises. The belief that, if I only had that, then I would be happy. Then this feeling of lack would go away. This belief fuels a powerful craving, an intense wanting. We then strive, we plan, we work, we manipulate our world to obtain the object of our desire, and sometimes we succeed. For a moment, there is pleasure, relief, a fleeting sense of satisfaction. The thirst is momentarily quenched. But then, inevitably, the novelty wears off. The pleasure fades. The new car becomes just a car. The thrill of the promotion subsides into the daily stress of the new job. And slowly, subtly, the original feeling of lack returns. The hum of dissatisfaction starts up again, and the entire cycle begins anew, with the mind already scanning the horizon for the next thing to fixate on. This is the mechanism of tanha. It is like drinking salt water to quench a thirst. For a brief moment it might feel like relief, but it ultimately leaves you thirstier than before. It is a treadmill of wanting and disappointment, and we are conditioned to run on it from the moment we are born. This fundamental thirst, this tanha, manifests in our lives in three primary ways. The first is the most familiar, the thirst for sense pleasures. This is the craving for things that delight our five senses and our mind. It is the desire for delicious food, for beautiful sights, for captivating music, for pleasant physical sensations, for entertaining stories and ideas. Our consumer culture is built entirely on stimulating and satisfying this form of thirst. It whispers to us from every advertisement and every storefront, promising that happiness is just one purchase away. This thirst drives us to accumulate possessions, to seek comfort, to chase fleeting highs. There is nothing inherently wrong with enjoying the pleasures of the senses, but the problem arises when we believe they are the source of lasting happiness. They are, by their very nature, temporary. The taste of the most exquisite meal lasts only a few moments. The pleasure of a new gadget fades. When we build our life's foundation on the pursuit of these fleeting experiences, we are building on shifting sand. The second form of thirst is deeper and more subtle. It is the thirst for existence, or the thirst for becoming. This is not just the craving to have something, but the craving to be someone. It is the ego's relentless project of self-creation and self-preservation. It is the deep desire to have a solid, lasting, and impressive identity. In our modern world, this is a powerful force. It is the thirst to be seen as successful, intelligent, attractive, or morally upright. It is the craving to become a respected professional, a perfect parent, a famous artist, or even a spiritually enlightened person. This thirst fuels our ambition, our competition, our tireless efforts at self-improvement. It is the voice in our head that compares us to others, that worries incessantly about our reputation, that basks in praise and recoils in terror from criticism. This thirst for becoming is a source of immense anxiety, because the identity we are trying to build is inherently unstable. It depends on external validation and circumstances we cannot control. It creates a constant, low-level fear that our carefully constructed self might crumble at any moment, that we might fail, that we might be exposed as a fraud. The third form of thirst is the dark twin of the second. It is the thirst for non-existence. When the pain of life, the dukkha of painful experience, becomes too intense, a powerful craving can arise to simply make it stop. This is the desire for annihilation, for escape, for oblivion. If the thirst for becoming is a pull towards pleasure and identity, the thirst for non-existence is a push away from pain and reality. It manifests in countless ways, both subtle and overt. It can be the simple act of losing oneself for hours in mindless television to avoid feeling loneliness or sadness. It can be the urge to drink or use drugs to numb emotional pain. It can be the desire to end a difficult relationship, quit a challenging job, or move to a new city, believing we can outrun our problems. In its most extreme form, This thirst for non-existence can manifest as thoughts of self-harm or suicide, the ultimate expression of the desire to escape from a reality that feels unbearable. It is the desperate cry of a mind in agony, seeking to destroy the experience of pain by destroying the experiencer. It is crucial to understand that this path does not advocate for the eradication of all desire. The teachings make a vital distinction between unhealthy, compulsive craving, or tanha, and a wholesome, skillful desire, known as chanda. Chanda is the desire to create, to learn, to grow, and to help others. The desire to be a kinder person is chanda. The desire to alleviate the suffering of a friend is chanda. The desire to create a beautiful piece of art or to build a just community is chanda. Unlike tanha, which is born from a sense of personal lack and is focused on what I can get, chanda is born from a sense of possibility and is often focused on what one can give. The path is not about becoming a passionless, indifferent being. It is about transforming the feverish, self-centered thirst of tanha into the clear, compassionate, and life-affirming energy of chanda. It is about learning to want what is truly beneficial for ourselves and for the world. There is a simple, poignant story used to illustrate how our own craving traps us. In some parts of Asia, a method for catching monkeys involves a coconut with a hole drilled in it, just large enough for a monkey's open hand to pass through. Inside the coconut, some rice or a sweet treat is placed as bait. The coconut is then chained to a stake. A monkey, driven by its desire, will come along, smell the treat, and slip its hand into the coconut. It will grasp the rice, making a fist. But now, its fist is too large to pull back through the narrow opening. The monkey is now trapped. It will pull and shriek and struggle, growing more and more frantic as the hunter approaches. But it is not the coconut or the chain that truly holds it captive. At any moment, it could be free. All it has to do is open its hand and let go of the rice. But its craving is so strong, its attachment to the prize so absolute, that it cannot bring itself to do so. And so, it is captured. We are that monkey. The world is filled with coconut jar-promising careers, perfect relationships, ideal body images, endless forms of pleasure and status. Driven by our thirst, we reach for them. We grasp them and we cling to them, making a fist in our minds. And then we find ourselves trapped, bound by our own attachments, struggling against our circumstances, feeling like victims. We blame the jar. We blame the chain. We blame the hunter. But the key to our freedom is, and always has been, in our own hand. It is the wisdom to see that it is our own grasping, our own clinging, our own tanha, that is the true source of our captivity. The physician has now shown us the diagnosis, dukkha, and its cause, tanha. With this knowledge, the path forward begins to illuminate. If the problem is our clinging to things, then we must begin to investigate the nature of the very things we are trying to grasp. This leads us directly to the great, flowing river of reality itself. We have arrived at a critical juncture in our investigation. The physician of the mind has offered a diagnosis for our disquiet, the pervasive experience of dukkha, and we have identified its root cause, the insatiable, burning thirst of tanha, the clinging and craving mind. We see now how we are like the monkey, trapped by our own fist, refusing to let go of the rice in the jar. This naturally leads to a profound question. What is the nature of the things we are so desperately clinging to? What is the nature of the pleasure, the status, the relationships, the very life we grasp with such force? The answer to this question forms the third great insight of this path, a truth as fundamental as gravity, yet one we spend most of our lives trying to deny. It is the truth of anicca, or impermanence. Anicca is the universal law that everything is in a constant state of flux. Nothing is static, nothing is permanent, nothing lasts. Everything that arises will inevitably pass away. This is not a dark or pessimistic philosophy. It is a simple, observable fact of reality, from the grandest cosmic scale to the most intimate, microscopic level. Think of the mountains, which we see as symbols of permanence and stability. Even they are being constantly weathered by wind and rain, slowly, imperceptibly, turning to dust over millennia. Think of the seasons, endlessly turning one into the other, a constant dance of birth, growth, decay, and death. The entire universe is not a collection of fixed objects, but a dynamic, unfolding process. It is a single, immense river of change. And we are not standing on the bank, watching it. We are in it. This truth becomes much more personal when we turn our gaze upon ourselves. Look at your own body. It seems so solid, so familiar, so you. Yet, it is a perfect illustration of anicca. It is not a static entity, but a bustling colony of billions of cells that are continuously dying and being replaced. The body you have today is not the same body you had 7 years ago, or even 7 minutes ago. It is aging, changing, responding to the food you eat, the air you breathe, the life you live. This process of aging, which our culture so often frames as a tragedy to be fought and concealed, is simply anicca in action. It is the natural, unavoidable unfolding of life. Even more volatile and fluid is the inner world of our minds. Think of your thoughts. They arise from nowhere, flicker in your consciousness for a moment, and then vanish. Worries, plans, memories, fantasies. They are like clouds passing through the vast sky of your awareness. They are not solid things. They are events. The same is true for your emotions. One moment you might feel a surge of joy, the next a pang of sadness, followed by a wave of anger or a spell of boredom. We often make the mistake of identifying with these fleeting states. We say, "I am angry," or "I am sad," but this is not quite true. It is more accurate to say that the energy of anger is passing through you, or the feeling of sadness is visiting you. Like the weather, these emotional states are temporary. They come, and if we allow them to, they go. To believe that any single emotion defines who we are is to mistake a passing cloud for the entire sky. When we understand this law of flux, we can finally see why our clinging, our tanha, is the direct cause of so much of our suffering. The core problem is this: we are trying to build a permanent home on ground that is constantly shifting. We are trying to build a solid dam in the middle of a flowing river. When we experience a moment of happiness, we cling to it. We say, "This is perfect. I want it to stay this way forever." But life, being a river, continues to flow. The moment passes, and because we were clinging to it, because we tried to freeze it, its passing feels like a painful loss. We suffer. When we experience a moment of pain or difficulty, we resist it. We say, "I don't want this. This shouldn't be happening." We push against it, creating immense tension and stress. We try to build a dam to hold back the unpleasant waters, but the river of reality is powerful. The pressure builds and builds until the dam breaks, and we are flooded with even greater suffering. The clinging to pleasure and the resistance to pain are two sides of the same coin, and both are a futile struggle against the fundamental nature of reality. The liberating insight of this path is that we don't have to fight the river. The goal is not to stop the flow, which is impossible, but to learn how to navigate it with grace and wisdom. When you truly, deeply accept the truth of impermanence, something remarkable begins to happen. Your fist, the fist of the monkey, begins to loosen its grip. Why? Because when you know for certain that you cannot hold on to anything forever, the frantic energy of grasping begins to seem pointless. The fear of loss diminishes because you understand that change and loss are not personal failures, but are simply the way things are. It is the entrance fee for the privilege of being alive. And here lies the great paradox and beauty of anicca. Far from making life meaningless or depressing, a deep appreciation of impermanence makes every moment infinitely more precious. When you know that this cup of tea, this conversation with a friend, this quiet moment of watching the rain fall is unique and will never come again in exactly the same way, you begin to pay attention, you savor it, you show up for it fully. The knowledge of its fleeting nature is the very thing that gives it its poignant beauty. Impermanence is what makes life precious. It is what urges us to love deeply, to forgive freely, and to live fully, because this present moment is the only one we will ever truly have. There is a famous Buddhist story that illustrates this journey from resisting impermanence to embracing it. A young woman named Kisagotami lived happily with her husband and her infant son. One day, her son fell ill and died. Consumed by a grief so powerful it bordered on madness, she refused to accept his death. She clutched the small, cold body to her chest and went from house to house, begging everyone she met for a medicine that could bring her son back to life. Some people ignored her, some mocked her, but most looked upon her with pity. Finally, a wise man saw her desperate state and, instead of dismissing her, said, "I do not have the medicine you seek, but I know a physician who does. Go to the Buddha." And Kisagotami ran to the Buddha and laid her child at his feet, pleading for the magic medicine. The Buddha looked at her with immense compassion and said, "There is only one thing you need to find. Go back into the village and bring me a single mustard seed. But it must be taken from a house where no one has ever lost a child, a spouse, a parent, or a friend." The woman was overjoyed. A single mustard seed seemed like such a simple task. She went to the first house and asked, "The Buddha has sent me to fetch a mustard seed for a medicine. Can you give me one?" "Of course," the woman of the house said. "But has anyone in this house ever died?" Kisagotami asked. The woman's face fell. "Oh, my child," she said. "You remind me of my greatest sorrow. My husband died only last year." Kisagotami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was always the same. Every family had a story of loss. One had lost a parent, another a sibling, another a child. The living were few, but the dead were many. As she went from door to door, the fire of her frantic, personal grief began to cool. She saw that her suffering was not unique. It was the shared condition of all people. Death was not a cruel trick played only upon her. It was a universal truth. She sat down by the side of the road, and in the deepening twilight, she watched the flickering lights of the village. She thought to herself, "How selfish I have been in my grief." She had found the medicine the Buddha had sent her to find. It was not a mustard seed. It was the wisdom of anicca. You can find this wisdom for yourself, not in a story, but in your own direct experience. Take a moment to simply observe a candle flame. Watch how it flickers and dances. Never the same, for even a fraction of a second. It is a perfect image of impermanent, vibrant life. Or look up at the sky and watch a cloud. See how it forms, changes shape, and eventually dissolves into the blue. Your own breath is perhaps the greatest teacher of anicca. Each breath has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The inhale flows into the exhale. You cannot hold on to the inhale. You must let it go to make space for the next. This simple, constant rhythm is the rhythm of the universe. To understand anicca is to loosen the grip of tanha. It is to learn to hold the experiences of our lives with an open hand rather than a clenched fist. But this deep seeing raises another, even more profound question. If everything is constantly changing our body, our thoughts, our feelings, then who is this I that is witnessing it all? If the river of life is in constant flow, is there a solid, unchanging rock in the middle of it that we can truly call ourself? This question leads us to the very heart of our perceived identity and to the next great discovery on this path of awakening. We have walked a significant distance on this inner journey. We began by acknowledging the subtle but pervasive dissatisfaction of life, the diagnosis of dukkha. We then identified its root cause in our own minds, the relentless, grasping thirst of tanha. And we have just explored the vast, flowing river of reality, recognizing that everything we try to cling to is, by its very nature, in a constant state of flux, the universal law of anicca, or impermanence. This leads us to the most intimate and challenging territory of all. It forces us to ask a question that lies at the very heart of our existence. If my body is always changing, if my feelings are fleeting, if my thoughts are like clouds passing in the sky, then who am I? Who is this I that experiences all of this? We have a deep instinctual feeling that while everything else may change, there is a core, a center, an essential self that remains constant. We feel like a permanent entity, a pilot in the cockpit of the body and mind, the unchanging witness to the movie of our life. The final and most profound of the three great marks of existence directly challenges this core assumption. It is the teaching of anatta, often translated as no self or non-self. This is without doubt the most counter-intuitive and radical insight of this path, and it is the key that unlocks the deepest freedom. The teaching of anatta proposes that if you look for this permanent, independent, unchanging self, this CEO in the headquarters of the mind, you will not be able to find it. What we call our self is not a solid entity, but a dynamic, interdependent process. It is a temporary gathering of physical and mental components, a flowing stream of events. It is more like a verb than a noun. To make this less abstract, the teachings provide a map of what we mistakenly call the self. They break down our experience into 5 categories, or aggregates. Think of these as the 5 main systems that, when working together, create the experience of being a person. The first is form, which is the physical body, with all its sense organs. As we've seen, this is impermanent. The second is feeling. This is the raw data of experience, the simple quality of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral that arises whenever our senses make contact with the world. The warmth of the sun on your skin is a pleasant feeling. The sound of a siren is an unpleasant feeling. The sensation of your clothes against your body is, likely, a neutral feeling. These feelings arise and vanish, moment by moment. They are not a solid self. The third aggregate is perception. This is the faculty of the mind that recognizes, identifies, and labels our experience. It's what looks at a collection of colors and shapes and says, tree, or hears a sound and says, bird song, or feels a sensation and says, anger. Our perceptions are heavily conditioned by our past, our memory, our language, and our biases. They are not a pure reflection of reality. The fourth aggregate is mental formations. This is a broad category that includes all our volitional activities, our habits, our reactions, our intentions, our thoughts, our beliefs, and our desires. It is the active, constructing part of the mind. It is the part that worries, the part that loves, the part that judges, the part that creates. These formations are not random. They are conditioned processes arising from past causes and creating future effects. They are patterns of energy, not the commands of a central, independent self. Finally, the fifth aggregate is consciousness. This is the fundamental quality of knowing or awareness. There is seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness, smelling consciousness, tasting consciousness, touching consciousness, and thinking consciousness. Importantly, this consciousness is not seen as a monolithic, all-encompassing awareness that exists on its own. It is completely dependent on the other aggregates. Seeing consciousness can only arise when there is an I, a visible object, and the faculty of perception. Without the other parts, it doesn't exist. It flickers in and out of existence, moment by moment, illuminating our experience. So, this collection of 5 changing processes form feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, what we call a person. When you look closely at your own experience, you can see these processes at work. But where, among them, is the permanent, unchanging I? Is it the body? No, that changes. Is it your feelings? No, they are fleeting. Is it your thoughts? They come and go. Is it consciousness itself? No, that arises and ceases in dependence on conditions. The startling conclusion is that the self we believe in so strongly is like a rainbow. A rainbow is a beautiful phenomenon that appears when sunlight and water droplets are in the right relationship. It is real in that we can see it, but it has no independent substance. You can't go to the end of the rainbow and pick it up. In the same way, the self is a phenomenon that arises when the 5 aggregates come together in a certain way. It is a useful convention, but it has no ultimate, independent reality. A classic story that brilliantly illustrates this is the dialogue between the Buddhist sage Nagasena and the Greek king Melinda. The king, a sharp and logical thinker, approached Nagasena and asked his name. The sage replied that he was known as Nagasena, but that this was just a name, a convenient designation, and that in the ultimate sense, there was no permanent person to be found there. The king was astounded and launched a series of logical challenges. If there is no person, Venerable Nagasena, who is it that wears these robes and takes this food? Who is it that lives a life of meditation? If someone were to kill you, there would be no murder. You are speaking an untruth. Nagasena remained calm. He then turned the tables on the king. He asked, "Your Majesty, how did you arrive here? Did you walk, or did you come in a chariot?" The king proudly replied that he had come in a chariot. "Excellent," said Nagasena. "Then please, define for me what a chariot is. Is the pole the chariot?" "No, Venerable Sir," replied the king. "Is the axle the chariot? Number, are the wheels, or the frame, or the reins the chariot?" To each question, the king had to answer, "No." Then, Nagasena continued, "Are all of these parts together the chariot?" "No, sir." "Then, is there something else, separate from all these parts, that is the chariot?" "No, Venerable Sir." Nagasena then delivered the final, clarifying point. "Your Majesty, you are the greatest king in all of India, and yet you say that the chariot is none of these things. Then where is the chariot? Are you speaking an untruth?" The king was humbled, forced to admit that chariot is simply a convenient name, a label we give to a collection of parts when they are assembled in a specific way. Nagasena smiled gently and said, "Just as chariot is a designation for the assembled parts, Nagasena is a designation for the 5 aggregates when they are assembled in this way. In the ultimate sense, there is no permanent person to be found. I.B. This insight is not an intellectual game. It is the key to profound liberation. A vast amount of our daily anxiety, anger, and fear comes from the constant, exhausting effort of protecting and promoting this fictional self. We worry about what people think of me. Our pride is wounded when I am insulted. We are terrified of failure because it threatens this image of a competent me. We grasp at success to enhance the story of me. The ego is like a tireless public relations agent for a client who doesn't actually exist. When we begin to see, even for a moment, that this solid self is an illusion, the entire defensive structure begins to relax. There is no solid entity to protect. There is no fragile ego to be shattered. An insult is no longer a personal attack, but simply an unpleasant sound and a painful feeling arising and passing away in the stream of experience. Furthermore, this understanding is the true foundation of compassion. As long as we believe in a solid me, there will always be a solid you and other. The world is divided into self and other, me and them. But when we see that our own being is an impersonal process of arising and ceasing aggregates, we realize that the same is true for everyone else. The hard line between self and other begins to melt. Your suffering, like my suffering, arises from the same conditioned processes. Your desire for happiness, like mine, is part of the same human experience. This shared vulnerability, this shared nature, gives rise to a natural, unforced empathy and kindness. We stop taking everything so personally. We have now examined the 3 marks of existence, the complete diagnosis of the human condition: dukkha, the illness of dissatisfaction; tanha, its cause in our clinging; and anicca and anatta, the impermanent and selfless nature of the reality we cling to. We have faced the diagnosis. We have identified the cause. We have understood the terrain. We have pulled the arrow of speculation from our flesh. Now, and only now, are we fully prepared to turn our attention to the medicine. We are ready to walk the path of healing. And that path begins with the simplest, most profound, and most accessible tool we possess: the anchor that can hold us steady in the flowing river of life, our own breath. We have journeyed deep into the philosophical heart of this path, confronting the diagnosis of our universal condition. We have looked at the reality of dissatisfaction, dukkha, its origin in our clinging thirst; tanha, and the impermanent, selfless nature of the world we try to grasp; anicca and anatta. These truths, while profoundly liberating, can also feel abstract, even overwhelming. It is natural to ask, this is a powerful diagnosis, but where is the medicine? Where do I begin the treatment? How do I apply this wisdom to the chaotic reality of my own life? The answer is elegantly simple, profoundly practical, and as close to you as this very moment. The medicine begins with your own breath. The practice of mindful breathing, known in the Pali language as anapanasati, is the cornerstone of this path of awakening. It is the foundational skill, the primary tool, the first and most important step in moving from theoretical understanding to lived experience. Why the breath? Why this simple, repetitive, biological function? Because the breath possesses a unique combination of qualities that make it the perfect object for training our wild and scattered minds. First, it is always with us. From the moment of our birth to the moment of our death, the breath is our constant companion. It does not cost anything. It requires no special equipment, no particular belief system, no quiet retreat. It is here, available to you in the boardroom, in the grocery line, in a traffic jam, and in the stillness of the night. It is the most portable and democratic anchor for the mind that exists. Second, and most critically, the breath is always in the present moment. You cannot take a breath that is in the past. You cannot take a breath that is in the future. You can only experience the breath that is happening right now. Our minds, as we know, are chronic time travelers. They love to dwell in the past, replaying old grievances and nostalgic memories, which often leads to depression. Or they race into the future, rehearsing anxieties and spinning catastrophic fantasies, which is the very definition of anxiety. The breath is the gentle but firm hand that takes our time-traveling mind and brings it home, back to the only time that is ever real, the present moment. Each conscious breath is an act of arrival. It is a declaration that for this one moment, you are fully here. The breath also serves as a miraculous bridge. It links what we perceive as the separate domains of our existence. It is the bridge between the body and the mind, a physical process that is profoundly affected by our mental state, and a mental state that can be profoundly calmed by our attention to the physical process. It is the bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. While we can consciously control our breathing, most of the time it happens all by itself, managed by the deep wisdom of our autonomic nervous system. By placing our conscious awareness on this typically unconscious process, we begin to harmonize these different aspects of our being. So, how do we begin this practice? The instructions are disarmingly simple. Find a posture that is both comfortable and alert. You can sit on a chair with your feet flat on the floor and your spine relatively straight but not rigid. You can sit cross-legged on a cushion. You can even lie down, though this can sometimes lead to sleep. The key is to find a position you can hold for a little while that embodies a sense of dignity and wakefulness. Allow your hands to rest in your lap or on your knees. Let your eyes gently close, or if you prefer, you can leave them slightly open with a soft, unfocused gaze directed towards the floor a few feet in front of you. Now, bring your attention to the physical sensation of breathing. You don't need to change your breath in any way. Your body has been breathing perfectly your entire life without your help. Your only task is to feel it. Become a curious scientist of your own experience. You might choose to rest your attention at the tip of your nostrils, feeling the subtle sensation of the cool air entering on the in-breath and the slightly warmer air leaving on the out-breath. Or you might prefer to rest your attention on the rise and fall of your abdomen. Feel the gentle expansion of your belly as you breathe in and the gentle contraction as you breathe out. Choose one spot and let that be your home base, your anchor. Rest your mind on these simple physical sensations. It is important to distinguish here between thinking about breathing and directly feeling the breath. The mind might want to narrate the experience, saying, "Okay, now I am breathing in. That was a long breath. Now I am breathing out." This is still the thinking mind. The invitation is to drop below the level of thought and simply feel the raw, physical sensations. No words, no labels, just the direct, non-conceptual experience of the air, the movement, the life force entering and leaving your body. Now, for the most important instruction of all. At some point, your mind will wander. It will be pulled away by a thought, a memory, a sound, a plan, a worry. This is not a mistake. It is not a sign that you are a bad meditator. It is simply the nature of the mind to wander. That is what minds do. The moment you realize your mind has wandered is a moment of victory. It is a moment of mindfulness. In that moment, without any judgment or frustration, gently acknowledge where your mind went thinking, and then, with great kindness, like leading a lost child back home, gently escort your attention back to the anchor of the breath. You may have to do this 100 times in 10 minutes. That is the practice. Each time you notice the mind has wandered and you gently bring it back, you are strengthening your muscle of attention. You are performing a sacred repetition, rewiring your brain for focus, calm, and presence. This simple act has profound effects. On a physiological level, focused, gentle breathing activates our parasympathetic nervous system, the body's natural relaxation response. It counters the chronic fight-or-flight mode that modern life keeps us trapped in. It can lower blood pressure, slow the heart rate, and reduce the levels of stress hormones like cortisol in our bloodstream. Psychologically, it creates a small space between you and your thoughts, allowing you to see that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that is aware of the thoughts. This space is the beginning of freedom. There's a helpful story about a young, eager carpenter who was trying to build a house. A wise old carpenter watched him for a while as he sawed away furiously at a piece of wood, sweating and struggling, yet making very little progress. The old carpenter approached him and said, "Young man, your saw looks very dull. Why don't you stop for a few minutes and sharpen it?" The young carpenter, annoyed and out of breath, replied, "I can't stop to sharpen the saw. I'm too busy sawing." We are all that young carpenter. Our mind is our saw. It is the primary tool with which we engage with the world, with our work, with our relationships. Yet we rush through our days with a dull, scattered, and distracted mind, working furiously but often ineffectively, creating more friction and exhaustion than is necessary. The practice of mindfulness of the breath is the act of stopping to sharpen the saw. It may feel like you aren't being productive. It may feel like you are wasting time. But in reality, you are performing the most essential task of all. You are honing your most valuable tool. The few minutes you spend each day creating a calm, clear, and focused mind will save you hours of frustrated and anxious effort. You will bring a sharper, more effective, and more peaceful presence to everything else that you do. The breath is your whetstone. It is the anchor in the storm of your life. It is the path back home to yourself. And now that we have found our anchor, we have the stability to begin observing the restless currents of the mind itself, the ceaseless river of our own thoughts. Having found our anchor in the gentle, reliable rhythm of the breath, we have created a safe harbor, a place of stability in the midst of the mind's ceaseless activity. And from this place of stability, we begin to notice, with greater clarity, the primary traffic of the mind, the endless stream of thoughts. For most of our lives, we are not even aware of this stream. We are swept away by it. We are so identified with our thoughts that we don't recognize them as thoughts at all. We take them to be reality. A thought arises that says, "I am not good enough," and we believe it. A thought arises that says, "Something terrible is going to happen," and we are gripped by fear. A thought replays an old insult, and we are consumed by anger. We are like a person dreaming, completely lost in the drama of the dream, unaware that we are the dreamer. The next crucial step on this path is to learn how to wake up from this dream. It is to learn how to watch the river of thoughts without being carried away by its current. The most liberating insight you can have on this journey is this: you are not your thoughts. Thoughts are events in consciousness. They are transient, impersonal, and often random mental weather. They are not you. You are the awareness in which the thoughts appear. You are the sky, vast, open, and serene, and your thoughts are merely clouds passing through. Some days, the sky of your mind is clear and blue. On other days, it is filled with dark, stormy clouds of worry or anger. But the sky itself is never harmed or stained by the clouds. The clouds are not the sky. In the same way, your awareness is not harmed or defined by your thoughts. The mistake we make, the fundamental source of so much of our psychological suffering, is that we forget we are the sky, and we believe we are the cloud. We contract our vast awareness down to the size of a single dark thought, and we suffer immensely. The practice, then, is to consciously create a space between the awareness and the thought. It is to learn to step back and observe the thinking process, rather than being a character caught in its story. How do we do this? We use our anchor. When you are sitting, anchored to the feeling of your breath, and you notice that your mind has been carried away by a train of thought, the first step is the gentle return we have already practiced. Acknowledge the thinking and kindly guide your attention back to the breath. But we can also add another layer of skill. As you become more stable, you can begin to gently note or label the thoughts as they arise. This is not a process of deep analysis. It is a simple, soft, mental whisper that categorizes the thought. For example, as you sit, you might notice your mind is rehearsing a conversation for tomorrow. You can gently label it planning. Then, you return to the breath. A moment later, a memory of a past embarrassment might arise. You can label it remembering. Then, you return to the breath. A thought might appear that says, "I'm no good at this meditation." You can label it judging. Then you return to the breath. Worrying, fantasizing, analyzing. The label should be light, like a feather touching a soap bubble. The purpose is not to get rid of the thought, but to see it for what it is. The act of naming it externalizes it. It turns it from being a part of me into being an object that I am observing. It gently cuts the cord of identification. It reminds you that you are the sky, not the cloud. You can visualize this in other ways. You might see your thoughts as leaves floating down a stream, and you are sitting on the bank, simply watching them drift by. You might imagine sitting by the side of a highway, and each thought is a car or a truck that passes. You don't have to jump out in front of the traffic and try to stop it. You just watch it pass. It is absolutely vital to understand that the goal of this practice is not to stop thinking. A blank mind is not the objective. Trying to stop your thoughts is a futile and frustrating endeavor. It is like trying to flatten the waves of the ocean. The nature of the ocean is to have waves, and the nature of the mind is to produce thoughts. The goal is not to stop the waves, but to learn how to surf. The goal is to change your relationship with your thoughts. It is to go from being their prisoner to being their compassionate and wise observer. It is to realize that you do not have to believe every single thing that your mind tells you. When you practice this for a while, you will make another fascinating discovery. You will realize that most of your thinking is incredibly repetitive. The same worries, the same self-criticisms, the same judgments, the same fantasies play on a loop, day after day. The mind has its favorite well-worn grooves, its familiar neural pathways. Seeing this repetition is incredibly freeing. It helps you to take your thoughts less seriously. You begin to see them not as urgent, factual reports on reality, but as old habits, like a catchy but annoying song that gets stuck in your head. You can almost develop a sense of humor about it. Ah, there's that old, not good enough story again. I've seen this movie before. This recognition drains the thoughts of their power. They lose their ability to command your belief and dictate your emotional state. There is a powerful story from the life of the Buddha that speaks to this practice of meeting our most difficult mental states. There was a fearsome bandit named Angulimala, whose name meant garland of fingers, for he wore a necklace made from the fingers of his victims. He was the terror of the countryside. He represents our most feared and violent thoughts, the thoughts of rage, hatred, or despair that we believe will destroy us if we face them. One day, the Buddha, the embodiment of calm awareness, decided to walk through the forest where Angulimala lived. The bandit saw the lone monk and was delighted at his next victim. He grabbed his weapons and started running, shouting, "Stop, monk! Stop!" The Buddha continued to walk at a calm, steady pace. Without looking back, he replied in a clear voice, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." The bandit was baffled. He ran and caught up to the Buddha, blocking his path. "How can you say you have stopped when you are still walking? And how can you say that I have not stopped when I am standing still?" The Buddha looked at him with fearless compassion and said, "I have stopped, Angulimala, in that I have put an end to killing living beings. I have laid down the violence within me. You have not stopped. You are still caught in the momentum of anger and hatred, a cycle that creates endless suffering for you and for others." In that moment, something shifted in Angulimala. He had spent his life meeting fear with fear and violence with violence. But here was a man who met his murderous rage with absolute, unwavering calm. The Buddha's stillness, his complete lack of fear or resistance, was something Angulimala had never encountered. It was like shouting at a vast, empty sky. The energy of his own aggression had nothing to push against, and so it collapsed. That fearless presence was the force that disarmed him and set him on a path of transformation. This is how we can learn to meet the bandits in our own minds. Our first instinct when a terrifying thought appears is either to fight it, wrestling with it and trying to make it go away, or to run from it, distracting ourselves with anything we can find. This practice suggests a third way, the way of the Buddha. It is the way of fearless, non-resistant presence. We can learn to sit still, anchor ourselves in the breath, and allow the thought to be there, without believing it and without fighting it. We meet our inner Angulimala with the stillness of the sky. And just like the bandit, when our thoughts are met not with resistance, but with calm, spacious awareness, they lose their power to terrorize us. They are seen for what they are, mere events, mere clouds, passing through the vast and peaceful sky of our true nature. By ceasing to fight a war against our own minds, we finally discover the peace that was here all along. And now, with this newfound stability in relation to our thoughts, we can turn our gentle, curious awareness to the even more powerful energies that so often fuel them, the energies of our emotions. Having learned to anchor ourselves in the breath and observe the ceaseless river of our thoughts from a place of stability, we are now ready to approach the most powerful currents in that river, the turbulent energies of our emotions. Just as we mistakenly identify with our thoughts, we are even more prone to being completely consumed by our feelings. An emotion like anger, fear, or profound sadness can feel like a tidal wave, lifting us up and crashing us down, leaving us feeling helpless and out of control. Our typical relationship with difficult emotions falls into one of two patterns. Either we suppress them, pushing them down into the basement of our psyche, pretending they don't exist with a forced smile, or we become possessed by them, allowing the raw energy of anger to erupt in hurtful words. or the energy of fear to paralyze us into inaction. This path offers a third way, a middle path of wise and compassionate engagement. It begins with a radical re-understanding of what an emotion actually is. We are taught to categorize our emotions into good ones, like joy and love, and bad ones, like anger, jealousy, and fear. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding. From this perspective, emotions are not good or bad. They are simply energy moving in the body. The word itself, emotion, can be seen as energy in motion. They are natural, human responses to life, and they carry important information. Fear is a signal that we may be in danger. Anger is often a signal that a boundary has been crossed. Sadness is a signal that we have lost something we value. To label these vital messengers as bad and to suppress them is like ignoring the fire alarm in your house because you don't like the sound of it. The problem is not the emotion itself. The problem is our reactive, unconscious, and unskillful relationship to it. When we don't know how to handle the energy of anger, it becomes destructive rage. When we don't know how to meet the energy of fear, it becomes chronic anxiety. The practice, then, is to learn how to meet these powerful energies with mindfulness, to allow them to be present without letting them take over. A wonderfully practical and compassionate map for this process has been distilled into a simple, memorable acronym, RAIN. It was developed by the contemporary Buddhist teacher, Tara Brach, and it offers 4 clear steps for navigating the stormy weather of our hearts. The R in RAIN stands for recognize. This is the first, crucial step of simply acknowledging what is happening. It is a moment of clear seeing, of turning on the light in a dark room. When you feel a powerful emotion beginning to surge, instead of immediately getting swept away, you can pause, even for a millisecond, and mentally whisper, "Ah, this is anger," or "Anxiety is here," or "Grief is present." This simple act of recognition is incredibly powerful. It immediately breaks the spell of unconscious reactivity. It interrupts the habitual storyline and creates a moment of clarity. You are no longer just in the emotion. You are beginning to be the one who is aware of the emotion. This shift from being the subject to being the observer is the beginning of all freedom. The A stands for allow. This step is often the most challenging, as it goes against our deepest conditioning. To allow means to let the feeling be there. It is to consciously drop the internal resistance, the mental bracing against the unwanted experience. You are giving the emotion permission to exist. This does not mean you like the feeling. It does not mean you agree with it or want it to stay forever. It simply means you are acknowledging the reality of the present moment, which is that this feeling is already here. Fighting a feeling that is already present is like jumping into a pool and then fighting the water. You only create more splashing and exhaustion. Allowing is a courageous act of surrender to the reality of the moment. You can say to yourself, "This is how it is right now. Let this be here." By making space for the emotion, you stop adding a second layer of suffering, which is the suffering of resisting your own experience. The I stands for investigate with kindness. Once you have recognized the emotion and allowed it to be present, you can then bring a gentle, non-judgmental curiosity to the experience. This is not a cold, intellectual analysis. It is a warm, embodied exploration. The key is to shift your attention from the story in your head, in the loop of who did what and why you are justified in feeling this way, and to bring your attention directly into your body. You can ask yourself, with genuine curiosity, what does this anger actually feel like as a physical sensation? Where do I feel it most strongly? In my chest? My stomach? My jaw? Is it hot or cold? Is it tight or vibrating? What is the texture of this sadness? This embodied investigation does two things. It grounds you in the direct, somatic reality of the feeling, which is often much more manageable than the catastrophic story the mind is telling, and it fosters a sense of intimacy with your own inner life. You are learning to listen to your body's language. You might also gently ask the feeling, "What do you believe?" or "What do you need?" You are approaching this wounded part of yourself as a kind friend, offering a listening ear. Finally, the N stands for nurture. After you have recognized, allowed, and investigated the emotion, you have likely connected with a vulnerable, wounded part of yourself. The final step is to offer that part some active care and compassion. This is where you become your own loving parent. Nurturing can take many forms. It might be the simple, physical gesture of placing a hand over your heart, offering warmth and comfort to the place that hurts. It might be whispering a few words of kindness to yourself, the words you would offer to a dear friend in the same situation. You might say, "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here with you. This is so hard, but we will get through it." You are actively giving yourself the reassurance and compassion that this hurting part of you so desperately needs. So often, when we feel difficult emotions, our inner critic swoops in to tell us we are weak or stupid for feeling this way. Nurturing is the direct antidote to that inner critic. It is the application of active, healing love. The beloved Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh offered a beautiful metaphor that perfectly encapsulates this entire process. He compared a strong, difficult emotion like anger to a crying baby. When a baby cries in the middle of the night, our first instinct might be to wish it would stop, to put a pillow over our head, or to get angry at the baby for waking us. But we know this doesn't work. A wise parent knows that the only way to soothe the crying baby is to give it our full attention. So, we get out of bed. We recognize that the baby is crying. That is the R. We go into the baby's room and we pick the baby up, holding it gently in our arms. That is the A of allowing, of embracing the reality of the situation. We are no longer fighting it. Then, while holding the baby, we try to figure out what is wrong. We investigate. Is the baby hungry? Is its diaper wet? Is it cold? Did it have a bad dream? That is the I. And finally, once we understand what is needed, we nurture the baby. We feed it. We change it. We sing it a lullaby. Or we simply hold it close, letting it feel our warmth and steady presence until it is calm again. This is how we can learn to treat our own inner storms. Our anger, our fear, our sorrow, they are our inner babies, crying out for our attention. To practice rain is to learn how to become a wise and loving parent to ourselves. It is a path of transforming our inner world from a battlefield of suppression and resistance into a safe and compassionate nursery. The goal is not to never have a crying baby again. The goal is to have the confidence and the skill to know exactly how to care for it with love when it does cry. By learning to offer this profound care to the most difficult moments of our inner life, we begin to cultivate a deep and unshakable kindness that becomes the very ground of our being. A kindness that begins, first and foremost, with ourselves. Having learned to meet our difficult thoughts and emotions with a wise and gentle presence, we arrive at the very heart of that gentle presence itself. It is the quality of compassion. And yet, for so many of us, this is a quality we reserve exclusively for others. We can offer kindness to a friend who has made a mistake. We can feel empathy for a stranger who is suffering. But what is the tone of voice we use with ourselves when we fail, when we feel inadequate, when we are not living up to our own expectations? If you listen closely to that inner dialogue, you will likely hear the voice of a harsh and relentless judge, a critic that is far crueler than any external enemy. It is a voice that says, "You're not good enough. You should have known better. You always mess things up." We would never dream of speaking to someone we love in this way, yet we subject ourselves to this internal barrage day after day. This inner critic is a ghost, an echo of past voices from parents, teachers, and a culture that taught us our worth is conditional, that it must be earned through perfection and achievement. We carry a mistaken belief that being hard on ourselves is what motivates us, that self-flagellation is the engine of self-improvement. But this path reveals that this is a profound and damaging myth. This constant inner warfare is not a source of strength. It is a source of chronic stress, anxiety, and shame. It drains our energy and makes us brittle and fearful. The true seed of healing and transformation is not self-criticism, it is self-compassion. It is essential to understand what self-compassion is and what it is not. Self-compassion is not self-pity. Self-pity is an isolating state of mind that says, "Poor me." It collapses our world down to our own personal drama and separates us from others. Self-compassion, on the other hand, is a state of connection. It recognizes that suffering, failure, and imperfection are not personal defects, but are part of the shared human experience. When you make a mistake, the voice of self-compassion doesn't say, "Poor me, I'm the only one who messes up." It says, "This is painful, and making mistakes is part of being human. Others have felt this way too." This recognition of our common humanity is a balm that soothes the sting of shame and isolation. Self-compassion is also not self-indulgence. It is not about letting ourselves off the hook or wallowing in passive behavior. The voice of self-indulgence might say, "I had a hard day, so I'm going to eat an entire pint of ice cream and watch television for 5 hours." The voice of self-compassion asks a wiser question. "I am suffering right now. What would be truly nourishing for me? What would support my long-term health and well-being?" The answer might be to meditate for 10 minutes, to go for a walk in nature, to make a healthy meal, or to call a supportive friend. Self-compassion is not about short-term pleasure-seeking. It is about a deep and abiding commitment to our own genuine welfare. Finally, self-compassion is not the same as self-esteem. Self-esteem is an evaluation of our worth, and it is often dependent on external factors. We feel high self-esteem when we succeed, when we are praised, when we feel we are better than others in some way. It is, by its nature, fragile and unstable. The moment we fail or are criticized, it can collapse. Self-compassion is not an evaluation at all. It offers kindness not because we are special or successful, but simply because we are a human being. It is an unconditional source of worth. It is a warm embrace we can give ourselves when we fail, precisely when our self-esteem has deserted us. It is a steady, resilient source of inner strength that is always available, regardless of our external circumstances. This practice of cultivating self-compassion is not merely a nice idea, it is a trainable skill. The primary method for this is a form of meditation known as metta, or loving-kindness meditation, directed towards ourselves. The practice is simple in form, but can be profound in its effect. You begin by finding a comfortable posture. Just as with mindfulness of breath, you allow your body to relax and your heart to soften. Then, you begin to silently repeat a few simple, benevolent phrases. The traditional phrases are, "May I be safe," "May I be happy," "May I be healthy," "May I live with ease." You repeat these phrases gently, allowing the intention behind them to settle in your heart. You are not trying to force a feeling. You are simply planting the seeds of kindness. For many of us, this practice can feel incredibly difficult at first. It can feel awkward, selfish, or even absurd. When we offer ourselves these phrases, the inner critic may shout even louder, "Who are you to be happy? You don't deserve this." This is a very common reaction. It is the resistance of a lifetime of conditioning. If this happens, it is important to be patient and kind with the difficulty itself. If the phrases feel hollow, you can try a few different approaches. You can bring to mind a person, or even a pet, who loves you unconditionally. Imagine their loving presence and try to feel that warmth. Then, see if you can offer just a little of that warmth to yourself. Another method is to visualize yourself as a small, innocent child and direct the phrases of loving kindness towards that vulnerable child within you. Often, it is easier to feel compassion for our younger self. The key is to persist gently, to keep planting the seeds. You are watering a part of your own heart that may have been in a drought for a very long time. It is a radical act of friendship with yourself. The supreme importance of this practice is beautifully illustrated in the life story of the Buddha himself. Before his enlightenment, as a young seeker named Siddhartha, he was convinced that the path to liberation was through extreme self-denial. He joined a group of ascetics and became their most dedicated student. He practiced the most severe austerities imaginable. He starved himself until his ribs protruded like a picket fence. He held his breath for so long he experienced excruciating pain. He slept on beds of thorns and exposed his body to the extremes of heat and cold. He was at war with his own body, believing that by conquering it, he could free his spirit. He was the ultimate practitioner of self-criticism and self-punishment. After 6 years of this, he was near death. He was weaker than ever before, and his mind, far from being clear, was clouded and unstable. One day, he collapsed by a river. As he lay there, he overheard a musician on a passing boat teaching his student. The master said, "If you tighten the string of the sitar too much, it will snap. If you leave it too loose, it will not make a sound. The string must be tuned just right, not too tight and not too loose, to produce beautiful music." In that moment, Siddhartha had a profound insight. He realized his entire approach had been wrong. He had tightened the string of his own being to the breaking point. A tortured body could not support a clear and peaceful mind. He had been denying his own humanity. Soon after, a young village woman named Sujata, seeing his emaciated state, offered him a bowl of rice milk. His 5 ascetic companions saw this as a betrayal, a sign that he had given up the spiritual quest. But for Siddhartha, it was the opposite. Accepting that simple nourishment was a radical act of self-compassion. It was the first time in years he had offered his body kindness instead of punishment. That bowl of milk did not just nourish his body, it nourished his spirit. It gave him the physical and mental strength to finally sit beneath the great Bodhi tree, with the vow that he would not rise until he had found the truth. It was this middle path, born from an act of profound self-compassion, that led directly to his enlightenment. He had to learn to be a friend to himself before he could become a teacher for the world. This is the path we are invited to walk. It is the middle way between the extremes of self-indulgence and self-punishment. It is the path of learning to tune the instrument of our own being with a wise and gentle hand. Self-compassion is not a detour or a luxury on the spiritual path. It is the path itself. It is the fertile ground from which all other qualities, like patience, wisdom, and joy, can grow. When we learn to offer this unconditional kindness to ourselves, we fill our own cup, and only from a full cup can we truly and sustainably offer the water of compassion to a thirsty world. Having planted the precious seed of self-compassion in the soil of our own heart, we have begun the most essential work of healing. We have learned to offer ourselves the kindness that we so freely give to others. But this is not the end of the journey. A seed, once sprouted, naturally grows towards the light and seeks to connect with the world around it. The compassion we cultivate for ourselves is not meant to be hoarded in a closed system. It is meant to overflow. Once our own cup begins to fill, we naturally develop the deep desire and the genuine capacity to share its contents with others. This is the practice of metta, or loving kindness. In its expansive form, the practice of systematically opening the heart and extending the circle of kindness to encompass all of life. This practice is a direct and powerful antidote to the states of mind that cause so much of our suffering. States like anger, resentment, jealousy, and fear. These emotions function by contracting our hearts. They build walls between me and you, creating a sense of separation and threat. Metta does the opposite. It is a practice of radical expansion. It systematically dismantles the walls we have built around our hearts, revealing the boundless, interconnected nature of all beings. It is crucial to understand that metta is not the same as the sentimental, preferential love we might feel for a partner or a child. That love, while beautiful, can often be tinged with attachment, expectation, and fear of loss. Metta is a different quality. It is an unconditional, benevolent will, a sincere and steady wish for the genuine happiness and well-being of others, without discrimination and without expecting anything in return. It is a trainable state of mind, a muscle of the heart that we can strengthen with practice. The traditional method for cultivating metta is a beautiful and systematic progression, moving outward in ever-widening circles. We begin, as we have learned, with ourselves. Anchoring ourselves in the breath, we silently repeat the phrases, "May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I live with ease." We spend some time allowing this warmth of self-acceptance to permeate our being, filling our own vessel first. Then, in the second stage, we bring to mind a benefactor or a dearly loved one. This should be someone for whom we feel easy, uncomplicated love and gratitude. It could be a close friend, a supportive family member, a mentor, or even a beloved pet. We bring their image to mind, perhaps picturing them smiling and happy. We hold them in our heart, and we extend the very same wishes to them. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. We are not trying to magically solve their problems. We are simply radiating a heartfelt intention for their well-being. This stage is usually pleasant and helps to amplify the feeling of warmth and open-heartedness that we will need for the later, more challenging stages. In the third stage, we expand the circle to include a neutral person. This is someone you see in your daily life, but for whom you have no strong feelings, positive or negative. It could be the cashier at your local supermarket, the mail carrier, or someone you see on your daily commute. We so often move through our world, treating these people as two-dimensional functions rather than as complex human beings. This stage is a powerful practice for breaking down the walls of indifference. You bring the image of this person to mind, and you offer them the exact same phrases of loving kindness. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. In doing so, you are acknowledging their full humanity. You are recognizing that this person, just like you, wants to be happy and free from suffering. This simple act begins to transform your perception of the world, from a collection of strangers into a community of fellow beings. The fourth stage is the most challenging and perhaps the most transformative. Here, we work with a difficult person. It is wise to begin with someone who is only mildly irritating, not the source of our deepest trauma. To bring a person who has caused us great pain into this practice requires a great deal of stability and should be approached with care, perhaps with the guidance of a teacher. But for a person who annoys us, or with whom we have a minor conflict, this practice can be profoundly freeing. The key here is to understand that this practice is a gift we give to ourselves. Holding on to anger and resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It only harms us. The practice of offering metta to a difficult person is the act of administering the antidote to our own heart. When you bring this person to mind, the warm feelings may vanish, replaced by anger or hurt. This is normal. Be patient. You may need to adapt the phrases. Instead of, "May you be happy," which might feel inauthentic, you could try, "May you be free from the suffering that causes you to act in harmful ways." This acknowledges that their hurtful actions likely spring from their own pain and confusion. You can simply wish, "May you be at peace." You are wishing for an end to the very conditions that make them difficult. If it feels impossible, you can simply return your attention to your benefactor or to yourself for a while to recharge the battery of loving kindness before trying again. This is not about condoning their actions. It is about freeing your own heart from the prison of hatred. Finally, in the fifth stage, we let the circle become boundless. We extend our loving kindness to all beings everywhere, without exception. We start with ourselves, our loved one, our neutral person, and our difficult person, and we hold them all together in our heart. Then we radiate that feeling outward to all the people in our city, to all the people in our country, to all beings on our continent and across the oceans. We extend it to friends and enemies, to humans and animals, to the powerful and the powerless, to all beings seen and unseen, in all directions of space. May all beings be safe. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings live with ease. You can imagine a warm, golden light flowing from your heart, enveloping the entire planet in a sphere of benevolent, unconditional love. The power of metta is not merely a poetic sentiment. There is a dramatic story that illustrates its tangible force. The Buddha's jealous cousin, Devadatta, tried many times to assassinate him. In one attempt, he arranged to have the ferocious royal elephant, Nalagiri, maddened with alcohol and set loose on the narrow street where the Buddha was walking. As the enraged elephant charged, screaming and destroying everything in its path, the townspeople panicked and fled. The Buddha's own disciples urged him to run, but the Buddha stood his ground, perfectly calm and still. He turned his full attention to the charging beast, not with fear, but with an immense and powerful radiation of pure metta. The ancient texts say that as the elephant entered this palpable field of loving kindness, it began to slow down. Its enraged trumpeting softened. Its eyes, which had been red with rage, became gentle. The immense creature, which had been a force of pure destruction moments before, walked meekly up to the Buddha, knelt before him, and allowed the Buddha to stroke its forehead. This story demonstrates a profound truth. Loving kindness is not a passive or weak emotion. It is a powerful, transformative force, capable of disarming the most violent hatred and fear, both in the world and within our own hearts. By practicing metta, we are not just making ourselves feel better, we are cultivating a force that has the power to heal the world, one heart at a time. We are learning to see with the eyes of kindness, and this will inevitably change Not just how we feel, but how we act, how we speak, and how we listen. The kindness we have learned to cultivate within ourselves is not meant to remain a secret, a private treasure locked away in the quiet of our meditation. It is a living energy that yearns for expression, a light that naturally seeks to shine into the world. The primary way this inner light touches the life of another is through the simple, yet profoundly powerful, act of communication. Every conversation we have is a bridge, an opportunity to connect our inner world with another's. And yet, for most of us, this bridge is often a place of conflict, misunderstanding, and missed connection. We speak without thinking, and we listen without truly hearing. Our conversations become a clash of two monologues, each person waiting for their turn to speak, to assert their opinion, to tell their story. This path offers us a radical alternative, a way to transform communication from a battlefield of egos into a sacred space of healing and understanding. This transformation begins not with speaking, but with the forgotten art of listening. We are taught from a young age how to speak, how to read, how to write, but whoever taught us how to listen? For most of us, listening is a passive, waiting activity. While the other person is speaking, our mind is furiously at work. We are judging what they are saying, comparing it to our own experiences, and, most importantly, formulating our reply. We are not truly present with them. We are present with the noisy workshop of our own mind, where we are busy crafting our response, our advice, our counter-argument. We are listening to reply, not to understand. The result is that the other person, on a deep, intuitive level, does not feel heard. They feel judged, analyzed, or simply tolerated until it is our turn to talk. This is the source of immense loneliness and disconnection in our world. Deep listening, as taught in this tradition, is a form of meditation. It is an active, compassionate, and fully engaged practice. The object of our attention is not our own breath, but the other human being in their totality. It begins with the gift of our presence. This means putting down our phone, turning away from our screen, and orienting our body towards the speaker. It means offering gentle, receptive eye contact that says, "I am here with you. You have my full attention." It is the offering of a generous and patient silence, a spaciousness in which the other person feels safe enough to truly express what is in their heart. We resist the urge to interrupt, to finish their sentences, or to immediately jump in with our own story. We simply provide the container of our quiet, unwavering attention. As we listen to the words, we also learn to listen to what is behind the words. We listen for the emotions. Is there sadness in their voice? Is there fear behind their anger? Is there longing beneath their frustration? We listen for the deeper need that is not being expressed directly. Often, when a person is complaining or angry, what they are really saying is, "I am in pain, and I need to know that someone sees my pain." Deep listening hears this unspoken cry. It is a practice of profound empathy, of momentarily setting aside our own worldview to try and see the world through the eyes of another. It requires us to release, for a few moments, our most cherished possession, our own agenda. We let go of the need to be right, the need to give advice, the need to fix their problem. So often, people do not need us to fix them. They need us to hear them. The simple, compassionate act of being fully heard can be more healing than any advice we could ever offer. It is a message that says, "You are not alone. Your experience is valid. You matter." To offer another person the gift of our deep, non-judgmental listening is one of the most profound acts of love we can perform. Once we have learned to listen from a place of deep presence and compassion, We can then turn our attention to the other side of the bridge, our speech. The Buddhist path offers an exceptionally clear and practical guide for transforming our speech from a source of harm into a source of healing. This practice is known as right speech or samavaka, and it is a cornerstone of the Noble Eightfold Path. It is not merely a set of rules, but a deep practice of mindfulness and ethical intention centered around four key principles. The first principle of right speech is to abstain from false speech. At its most basic level, this means not telling lies. Honesty is the bedrock of trust, and without trust, no genuine relationship can flourish. When we lie, we create a world of illusion and suspicion, and we damage not only our connection with others, but also our own integrity. But this principle goes deeper than just avoiding outright falsehoods. It includes the subtle forms of dishonesty we engage in every day. It means abstaining from exaggeration, from embellishing stories to make ourselves seem more interesting or important. It means abstaining from tactical omissions, from leaving out key details to present ourselves in a more favorable light. On a deeper level still, it means living an authentic life, aligning our outer words and actions with our inner values so that we are not living a lie to ourselves or to the world. The second principle is to abstain from divisive or slanderous speech. This is the practice of refusing to use our words as a weapon to harm another person's reputation or to create conflict between people. This includes gossip, which can feel so tempting. We often gossip to feel a sense of inclusion with one group by maligning someone who is outside of it, or to feel a momentary sense of superiority. But this practice asks us to see the immense harm that gossip causes. It poisons the well of community. It sows seeds of mistrust and creates a climate of fear. We learn to ask ourselves, are my words building bridges, or are they building walls? This principle is more relevant today than ever before, in an age where online platforms can amplify divisive speech and rumor to a global audience in an instant. The practice of right speech is a commitment to using our words to foster harmony and understanding, not discord and separation. The third principle is to abstain from harsh speech. This includes the obvious forms of verbal violence, like yelling, cursing, and insults, but it also includes the more subtle and sometimes more insidious forms of harshness. It includes sarcasm that has a cutting edge, belittling comments disguised as jokes, condescending tones, and chronic criticism. These are the paper cuts of communication that can slowly bleed a relationship dry. Words can be weapons, and they can leave invisible scars that last a lifetime. This practice is about making our speech a safe haven for others. It is about learning to speak to people, especially those closest to us, with the same kindness and respect we would offer a cherished guest. This doesn't mean we can never speak about difficult topics, but it means we do so with a gentle tone and a compassionate heart, with the intention to heal, not to wound. The fourth and final principle is to abstain from idle chatter. This may seem less serious than the other three, but it is a subtle and important practice. Our modern world is terrified of silence. We feel a nervous compulsion to fill every empty space with noise, with meaningless talk about the weather, about celebrities, about trivialities. This isn't to say that all light conversation is bad, but the practice asks us to become mindful of our tendency to speak just for the sake of speaking. Often, idle chatter is a way of avoiding genuine connection, or a way of distracting ourselves from the discomfort of our own inner world. By practicing a noble silence more often, we begin to value our words more. We speak with greater intention. We learn that sometimes the most eloquent and connecting thing we can do is to simply share a moment of silence with another person. This practice cultivates a mind that is less scattered and a presence that is more peaceful. To bring all four of these principles into our daily life, we can use a simple yet profound filter known as the 3 gates of speech. Before we speak, we can train ourselves to pause for a moment and ask our words to pass through these 3 gates. The first gate is it true? Am I certain that what I am about to say is factually accurate? Or is it a rumor, an opinion, or a biased judgment? This gate cultivates honesty and intellectual integrity. If the words are true, they may proceed to the second gate. Is it necessary? Does this need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said right now? This gate cultivates wisdom and restraint. It stops us from offering unsolicited advice, from stating the obvious, or from speaking simply to hear the sound of our own voice. If the words are true and necessary, they must pass through the final, most important gate. Is it kind? What is my intention in speaking these words? Am I seeking to help, to heal, to connect, to encourage? Or am I, perhaps unconsciously, seeking to prove a point, to win an argument, to elevate myself, or to subtly hurt another? This gate cultivates a heart of compassion. Only if our words can pass through all 3 gates should they be spoken. A story is told of a man who came to the Buddha and asked him, "Venerable Sir, do you ever speak words that are unpleasing and unwelcome to others?" The Buddha gave a nuanced and insightful reply. He explained his own filter for speech. First, he would ask if the words were true and beneficial. If they were untrue or not beneficial, he would not say them. If they were true and beneficial, he would then consider whether they were pleasing or unpleasing. If they were true, beneficial, and pleasing, he would speak them, knowing the right time to do so. But if the words were true and beneficial, yet unpleasing and unwelcome to others, he would still speak them, but only after carefully discerning the absolute right time and circumstance to do so. This story reveals the profound wisdom of this practice. Loving speech is not about being a people pleaser or avoiding difficult truths. Sometimes, the most compassionate thing we can do is to speak a truth that is hard for someone to hear. But we do so only when we know it is for their benefit, and we do so with immense care, with a heart full of goodwill, and with a wise sense of timing. Our words create worlds. Every conversation, every text message, every email is an act of creation. Through the practice of deep listening and loving speech, we choose, moment by moment, to create worlds of safety, trust, clarity, and compassion. We transform the bridge of communication into a sacred space, a true expression of our deepest and most loving heart. As we learn to listen with a quiet mind and speak with a kind heart, we are actively shaping our inner world. We are turning the soil, pulling the weeds of reactivity and judgment, and creating the conditions for something beautiful to grow. This path now invites us to consciously plant and cultivate the most noble and beautiful qualities of the human heart. 4 states of being that are so vast and powerful, they are known in the Buddhist tradition as the Brahma Viharas, or the divine abodes. They are called this not because they turn us into gods, but because to dwell in these states is to experience a taste of heaven on earth. They are loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. These 4 qualities are like 4 great wings that, when fully developed, allow the heart to soar above the turbulence of the world, free, boundless, and full of grace. The first of these, which we have already begun to cultivate, is metta, or loving kindness. Metta is the foundation, the radiant sun from which the other qualities are warmed. It is the simple, unconditional wish for all beings, without exception, to be well and happy. It is a steady, gentle warmth that we first learn to direct towards ourselves, filling our own hearts with a sense of safety and acceptance. Then, as we have practiced, we extend it outwards in ever-widening circles. Metta is the direct antidote to the poison of hatred, anger, and ill will. Where ill will contracts the heart and wishes harm, metta expands the heart and wishes well. It is important to distinguish metta from its near enemy, which is selfish attachment or conditional love. This near enemy looks like love, but it is a form of commerce. It says, "I will love you as long as you make me happy, as long as you meet my needs." It is a love that is tinged with clinging and fear. Metta, true loving kindness, is free from this. It is a boundless generosity of spirit. It wishes you to be happy simply because you exist. It is a radical stance of friendship towards all of life. From the fertile ground of metta, the second divine abode naturally arises, karuna, or compassion. If metta is the wish for all beings to be happy, karuna is the heart's response when they are not. It is the tremor of the heart in the presence of suffering, combined with the active desire to see that suffering relieved. It is not merely a feeling, it is an intention that spurs us to action. The direct enemy of compassion is, of course, cruelty, the desire to inflict pain. But its near enemy is a state we often confuse with compassion, and that is pity. Pity establishes a distance between ourselves and the other. It looks down from a position of superiority and says, "Oh, you poor thing, I am so glad I am not in your position." Pity separates. Karuna, true compassion, does the opposite. It closes the distance. It recognizes our shared humanity in the face of suffering. It says, "I see your pain, and it touches my own. We are in this together." It is the force that motivates a parent to soothe a crying child, a doctor to heal a patient, a friend to listen deeply to another's sorrow. It is the recognition that no one's suffering is truly separate from our own. To cultivate karuna is to develop a heart that is brave enough to stay open in the presence of pain and loving enough to do what it can to help. The third divine abode is perhaps the one our modern, competitive culture has the most difficulty with. It is mudita, often translated as sympathetic or appreciative joy. Mudita is the practice of taking genuine, unselfish delight in the happiness, success, and good fortune of others. It is the ability to celebrate another person's victory as if it were your own. Its direct enemy, and a poison that is rampant in our society, is envy or jealousy, which is the pain we feel at another's success. Mudita is the direct antidote to this poison. To practice mudita is to actively look for the goodness and happiness in the world, and to rejoice in it. When a friend gets a promotion, when a colleague receives praise, when a stranger on the street is laughing with joy, mudita allows us to share in that happiness. This radically expands the amount of joy available to us. If we are only happy when good things happen to us, our opportunities for happiness are quite limited. But if we can be happy when good things happen to anyone, our opportunities for joy become infinite. Like the others, mudita also has a near enemy. This is a kind of hypocritical or vicarious excitement, a boisterous celebration that is more about our own experience than the other person's. It is the feeling of being a fan at a sports game, where the excitement is real, but ultimately self-referential. True mudita is quieter, purer, and more selfless. It doesn't need to be the center of attention. It is the simple, heartfelt delight in seeing another being flourish. It requires a heart that is confident and generous enough to feel no sense of lack in another's abundance. It is a beautiful and powerful practice that replaces the bitterness of comparison with the sweetness of shared celebration. Finally, we arrive at the fourth and culminating divine abode, awaken, or equanimity. Equanimity is the crown jewel of the heart's training. It is a state of profound balance, stability, and spaciousness. It is the ability to remain centered and open in the face of the inevitable ups and downs of life, what are known as the 8 worldly winds: pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, fame and disrepute. The untrained mind is constantly thrown off balance by these winds, elated by praise, crushed by blame, grasping for pleasure, and recoiling from pain. Equanimity is the deep, unshakable peace that can experience all of these without being swept away. Its most dangerous near enemy is indifference. From the outside, equanimity can look like coldness or detachment, but this is a complete misunderstanding. Indifference is a state of shutting down, of not caring. Its message is, I don't care what happens to you. It is a form of aversion. Upekkha, true equanimity, is the opposite. It is a state of profound caring that is so vast and all-inclusive that it does not get caught in attachment to outcomes. It is the wisdom to know that we cannot control the lives of others, nor the unfolding of events. We can act with love and compassion, but we must release our attachment to the results. It is the spacious heart that loves all beings equally, without preference or prejudice. It is like the sun, which shines its light on the saint and the sinner, the flower and the weed, without discrimination. It is the fruit of a heart that has been fully trained in loving kindness, compassion, and sympathetic joy. We can think of a heart cultivated in these 4 states as a great and spacious house. It has 4 large windows, open to the 4 directions. The window of metta opens to the east, greeting the dawn of each new day with a warm and friendly wish for all beings to be happy. The window of karuna opens to the north, facing the cold and biting winds of the world's suffering, not with fear, but with the courageous and unwavering intention to help. The window of mudita opens to the south, allowing the warm sunshine of others' joy and success to stream in, filling the house with light and celebration. And the window of upekkha opens to the west, calmly watching the inevitable sunset of all things, the constant changing of life's circumstances, with a deep, unshakable, and all-embracing peace. A house with these 4 windows open is not afraid of any weather. It is stable, filled with light, and has room for all of life. This is the home we can build within our own heart, a divine abode, a place of true refuge, available to us in any moment. To cultivate these 4 immeasurable qualities is to become a true friend to the world, for our peace and our love become a source of strength and comfort for all those whose lives we touch. Having cultivated the 4 divine abodes of the heart-loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, we arrive at a state of profound balance and spaciousness. But this spaciousness, this calm stability in the face of life's storms, is not a passive condition. It is supported by a deep and active skill, a practice that is perhaps one of the most essential and misunderstood on the spiritual path. This is the art of letting go. Our culture often glorifies the act of holding on. We are told to hold on to our memories, to hold on to our ambitions, to never give up, to fight to the bitter end. While perseverance has its place, this path teaches us a different kind of strength, a different kind of courage. It is the wisdom to know when to hold on, and the even greater wisdom to know when and how to let go. We walk through our lives, accumulating burdens, often without even realizing it. Like a traveler who picks up heavy stones on a long journey, we collect past hurts, old regrets, resentments, and grievances. We are weighed down by rigid expectations of how the future should unfold, and by the exhausting, futile effort to control every outcome. We believe that carrying these burdens is necessary, that they somehow define us or protect us. But in reality, they are the source of our weariness, our anxiety, and our lack of freedom. Letting go is not an act of failure or weakness. It is not apathy or indifference. It is a conscious, intelligent, and courageous act of self-liberation. It is the choice to set down the heavy bags so that we can finally walk our path with lightness and grace. What, then, are these heavy stones that we must learn to set down? The first are the burdens of the past. We carry our past with us in two primary forms: regret and resentment. Regret is the act of endlessly reliving our past mistakes. The mind becomes a courtroom where we are both the prosecutor and the defendant, endlessly re-examining an old decision, a clumsy word, a moment of failure. We torture ourselves with the fantasy of, if only I had said that differently, if only I had taken that other path. This is a form of self-punishment that keeps us chained to a past that no longer exists. To let go of regret does not mean we fail to learn from our mistakes. On the contrary, we learn the lesson, we extract the wisdom, and then we release the need to keep punishing ourselves for it. It is an act of profound self-forgiveness, an acceptance of our own imperfect humanity. The other great burden of the past is resentment. When someone has hurt us, it is natural to feel pain. But resentment is the act of reliving that pain over and over again. It is allowing a person or an event from the past to continue occupying space in our minds, rent-free, and to continue hurting us in the present. We rehearse the injustice, we fuel the anger, we cling to our sense of victimhood. There is a famous saying that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. It only harms ourselves. To let go of resentment is one of the most powerful gifts we can give to ourselves. It is not about condoning the other person's harmful actions or pretending the hurt didn't happen. It is not about forgiving them for their sake. It is about freeing ourselves. It is a declaration that says, I will no longer allow your past actions to control my present peace. I am setting down this poison because I choose to be healthy. I choose to be free. Just as we carry the past, we also carry heavy burdens concerning the future. We cling desperately to our expectations. We have a detailed mental blueprint of how our lives are supposed to look, how our partner should behave, how our children should turn out, how our career should progress. We project this blueprint onto the fluid, unpredictable reality of life. And then we suffer immensely when life, as it always does, deviates from our plan. Letting go of these rigid expectations is not about giving up on our goals or dreams. It is about holding them more lightly. It is about falling in love with the process rather than being attached to a specific outcome. It allows us to meet the unfolding of life with openness and curiosity, to find joy and opportunity in the unexpected turns of the road. It is the shift from demanding that life conform to our will, to learning to dance with life as it is. Underlying our attachment to expectations is an even deeper clinging, the clinging to control. We live in a world that is fundamentally uncertain, a world governed by the law of impermanence. This uncertainty can create a deep sense of anxiety, and to manage that anxiety, we try to control everything. We try to control what others think of us. We try to control the stock market. We try to control the weather. It is an exhausting and impossible task. Letting go, in this context, is an act of profound wisdom and humility. It is the acceptance of what is within our controller, own intentions, our own actions, our own responses, and what is not. It is finding a deep sense of security, not in our ability to manipulate the external world, but in our ability to cultivate a calm and resilient heart that can meet any circumstance with grace. The process of letting go is an art, a skill we can cultivate. It begins with the courage to accept reality. We cannot let go of something if we are still denying its existence or fighting against it. We must first turn towards the clinging with mindfulness. We recognize it. We feel the tightness in the body, the tension in the jaw, the clenching in the stomach that comes from holding on so tightly. We notice the repetitive thought loops that circle around the regret or the resentment. Then, we must be willing to acknowledge the suffering that this clinging is causing. We see clearly, this is heavy, this is painful, this holding on is the source of my own dukkha. Only then can we make a conscious, gentle intention to release our grip. This is not a violent act of pushing away. It is a soft and gentle opening. You can visualize it as opening a clenched fist and allowing a heavy stone to simply drop to the ground. You can use the out-breath as a vehicle for release. With each exhalation, you can imagine yourself breathing out the tension, the story, the burden. It is important to know that letting go is often not a single dramatic event. More often, it is a process. We may have to let go of the same resentment 100 times. Each time we notice we have picked it up again, we gently, without judgment, set it back down. Each time we do this, our grip becomes a little looser and our heart becomes a little lighter. There is a classic Zen story that perfectly illustrates this art. Two monks, one senior and one junior, were on a long journey. They came to a river where the bridge had been washed away. A beautiful young woman in fine silk robes stood by the bank, distressed as she could not cross the muddy, rushing water without ruining her clothes. The junior monk, being very pious and strictly adhering to his vows never to touch a woman, turned his head away. The senior monk, however, went over to the woman, and without a word, he lifted her onto his shoulders, waded across the river, and gently set her down on the other side. She thanked him, and he and the junior monk continued on their journey. For hours, the junior monk was silent, but he was seething with inner turmoil. He was agitated and judgmental, his mind replaying the scene over and over. Finally, he could not contain it any longer. He burst out, "Brother, how could you do that? You know our vows. We are forbidden from even looking at a woman, let alone touching one and carrying her like that. How could you break our sacred rules?" The senior monk looked at his agitated companion with a calm and gentle smile. He replied softly, "Brother, I set that woman down by the river hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This story reveals a profound truth about our own minds. We are all, in some way, the junior monk. We carry events, conversations, and hurts with us long after they are over. We allow the past to burden our present moment. To learn the art of letting go is to learn to be like the senior monk, to engage with life fully and skillfully in the present moment, and then to release it completely without leaving a trace. It is the practice of setting down the woman by the river. By releasing our tight grip on the past that is gone and the future that has not yet come, we liberate ourselves to arrive fully, with a light heart and an open mind, in the only place life ever truly exists, the precious and ever-present now. Having learned to release the heavy burdens of the past and the future, our hands are finally empty. Our minds, once clenched around regrets and anxieties, can begin to open. And into this newfound openness, a simple and profound reality can finally enter. It is the reality of the present moment. We have spent so much of our journey exploring the complex inner workings of the mind, but the ultimate destination of all this exploration is a place we never actually left. It is here, and it is now. This path teaches us that our true home is not a destination we must strive to reach. It is a state of being we must learn to inhabit. The power of now is the practice of finally coming home. For most of our lives, we live in a self-imposed exile from the present. Our body is here, but our mind is elsewhere. It is a time-traveling machine, lost in one of two phantom realms. The first is the realm of the past. The mind endlessly wanders through the graveyards of memory, replaying old conversations, dissecting past mistakes, clinging to moments of former glory, or nursing old wounds. To live primarily in the past is to be haunted by ghosts. It is a recipe for regret, for sadness, for a sense of life that has already been lived and lost. The second realm is the future. The mind projects itself forward, spinning endless scenarios of what might be. It creates elaborate plans, rehearses anxious encounters, and generates catastrophic fantasies. To live primarily in the future is to be in a constant state of striving and anxiety, chasing a horizon that never gets any closer. We are so busy preparing for life, so busy documenting the life we have lived, that we completely miss the act of living itself. We avoid the present moment for many reasons. Sometimes, the present is painful, and escaping into the abstract world of thought feels like a refuge. More often, however, it is simply a deeply ingrained habit. The momentum of our thinking mind has been running unchecked for decades, and it doesn't know how to stop. Our culture actively encourages this exile. It tells us that happiness is just around the corner, in the next achievement, the next purchase, the next relationship. It urges us to be productive, to plan, to optimize, constantly orienting us toward a future that never arrives. The result is a quiet tragedy. Our life is a string of present moments, but we are absent for almost all of them. We are missing the only life we will ever have. The practice of mindfulness is the art of reversing this exile. It is the conscious, gentle, and repeated act of bringing the mind home to the body, home to the senses, home to the now. We have already learned the primary tool for this, the anchor of the breath. But we can extend this practice into every single activity of our day, transforming the most mundane moments into opportunities for profound presence and awakening. Consider the simple act of drinking a cup of tea or coffee. For most of us, this is a mechanical process. We gulp it down while checking emails, planning our day, or worrying about a problem. The drink is merely fuel, and the experience is forgotten before it is even over. A mindful approach transforms this completely. As you hold the cup, you begin by simply feeling its presence in your hands. Feel its weight, its shape, its warmth. Notice the color of the liquid. Watch the steam rising from its surface. Before you take a sip, bring the cup to your nose and inhale its aroma. Then, you take a small sip. You don't immediately swallow. You allow the liquid to rest in your mouth, noticing its taste, its texture, its temperature. You feel the sensation of swallowing as it travels down your throat. In these few moments, You are not in the past or the future. You are completely here, engaged in a rich, sensory experience. You are tasting your tea, not your thoughts. This simple act becomes a meditation, a small island of peace. In the middle of your day, we can bring this same quality of attention to eating. We can take one bite of our meal and treat it as the most important event in the universe. We can look at the food, noticing its colors and shapes. We can chew slowly, savoring the explosion of flavors. We can feel a sense of gratitude for the sun, the soil, the rain, and the countless people whose labor brought this food to our plate. In this way, eating is no longer a mechanical act of refueling. It is a communion with the entire cosmos. We can practice this as we walk. Walking meditation is not about getting to a destination. It is about being fully present with each step. As you walk, you can bring your attention to the soles of your feet. Feel the sensation of your foot lifting off the ground, moving through the air, and then making contact again. Heel, ball, toes. You can coordinate your breath with your steps. You are not rushing. You are arriving, over and over again. With each step, the great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh taught his students to practice this by imagining they were kissing the earth with their feet. With this intention, a simple walk to the car becomes a beautiful expression of your connection to the planet. This is the miracle that Thich Nhat Hanh spoke of when he said, "The miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to walk on the green earth in the present moment, to appreciate the peace and beauty that are available now." When we are lost in our thoughts, we are living in a gray, two-dimensional, conceptual version of reality. When we drop into the present moment through our senses, the world comes alive. Colors become more vivid. Sounds become richer. The air feels fresher. We are no longer looking at the menu of life. We are tasting the meal. This is not a mystical state. It is our birthright. It is the reality that is always waiting for us, right underneath the noisy static of our thinking mind. There is a timeless story of a poor man who lived in a humble shack. He spent his whole life hearing tales of a magnificent, wish-fulfilling jewel that was hidden somewhere in the world. Believing that this jewel was the key to his happiness, he left his home and began a long and arduous quest. He traveled for decades, crossing vast deserts, climbing treacherous mountains, and facing countless dangers. He searched in every cave and every kingdom, always seeking, always striving, but he never found the treasure. Finally, old, exhausted, and utterly defeated, he made the long journey back to his humble home. He walked into the familiar old shack and collapsed onto his straw mat. As he did, a loose thread on his tattered jacket caught and tore, and from a hidden pocket sewn deep inside the lining, a dazzling jewel of unimaginable brilliance fell out and rolled onto the floor. It had been there the entire time, a gift from his mother years ago that he had completely forgotten. In his frantic search for a treasure out there, he had never once thought to look within. We are all that man. The precious jewel is the present moment. We seek happiness, peace, and a sense of richness in the future, in our accomplishments, in our possessions, in far-off places. We embark on a lifelong, exhausting quest for something more, something better. But the greatest treasure we could ever possess is already here, sewn into the very fabric of our being. It is the simple, profound, and miraculous reality of this moment, right now. Our life is not the story we tell ourselves about the past and the future. Our life is nothing more than a series of present moments. By learning to inhabit each of these moments with our full, undivided attention, we reclaim our life. We discover the infinite richness that was here all along, waiting patiently for us to come home. Having discovered the precious jewel of the present moment, we begin to realize that the source of true richness lies not in the external world, but within the landscape of our own awareness. Our capacity to be present, to love, to let go. These are the true measures of a wealthy life. This insight brings us face to face with one of the most powerful and pervasive illusions of our modern age, the great promise of materialism. From the moment we are born, our culture whispers a seductive story in our ear. It tells us that happiness can be purchased. It tells us that peace of mind will arrive with the next promotion, the new car, the bigger house, the more fashionable clothes. It presents life as a ladder of acquisition, and we are taught to climb it relentlessly, believing that a state of lasting satisfaction awaits us at the top. This path invites us to examine this promise with a clear and gentle eye. It asks us to look at our own experience. We have all acquired things we once desperately wanted, and in the moment of acquisition, there is a thrill, a temporary spike of pleasure. But how long does it last? The new car smell fades. The thrill of the new phone wears off in a week. The bigger house comes with bigger repairs. Soon, the new possession becomes just another part of the background of our lives, and the mind, still feeling a subtle sense of lack, begins to scan the horizon for the next purchase, the next target, believing that one will finally be the one to deliver lasting contentment. This endless cycle is known to modern psychologists as the hedonic treadmill. We keep running faster and faster on the treadmill of getting and spending, yet we remain in the very same place emotionally. It is a game that is rigged from the start, a promise that can never be fulfilled, because it is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of where happiness comes from. Materialism also thrives on the poison of comparison. The hedonic treadmill is exhausting enough on its own, but it becomes truly torturous when we are constantly looking over our shoulder to see how we measure up to others. We are conditioned not just to want things, but to want things that will elevate our status in the eyes of others. Our sense of well-being becomes dependent on having more than our neighbor, on keeping up with the latest trends, on curating an image of success. In the age of social media, this disease of comparison has become a global epidemic. We are no longer just comparing ourselves to our neighbors. We are comparing our own messy, complex, behind-the-scenes reality with the perfectly polished, filtered, and curated highlight reels of millions of people around the world. It is a recipe for perpetual dissatisfaction. It creates a constant, gnawing feeling that our life is somehow deficient, that we are missing out, that we are not enough. This game is impossible to win, for there will always be someone who appears to have more. It is essential to understand that the Buddhist path does not condemn wealth or advocate for a life of squalor. The Buddha did not teach that money is the root of all evil. He taught that clinging to money and the deluded belief that it is the ultimate source of happiness is a root of suffering. There is a deep respect in this tradition for right livelihood, for earning a living in a way that is ethical and does not cause harm. Wealth can be a powerful tool. It can provide safety, it can support our loved ones, and it can be used to alleviate the suffering of others. The problem is not the tool, but our relationship to it. When wealth becomes our master, when our entire life is organized around its acquisition and preservation, it becomes a golden cage. The alternative offered by this path is not poverty, but an inner quality of profound richness, known as contentment, or in the Pali language, santuthi. Contentment is not passive resignation or a lack of desire to improve one's life. It is the deep and peaceful realization of enough. It is a sense of wholeness that is not dependent on external conditions. It is the joy that arises from appreciating what we have, rather than the anxiety that comes from fixating on what we lack. When we have truly discovered the jewel of the present moment in our own pocket, we are no longer driven by the frantic need to search for glittering pebbles outside of ourselves. This inner contentment is the only true wealth, for it cannot be diminished by a stock market crash, stolen by a thief, or lost to the decay of time. It is a stable, reliable, and deeply peaceful state of being. The most powerful practice for loosening the grip of materialism and cultivating this spirit of contentment is the practice of dana, which means generosity or giving. If the habit of the materialistic mind is to constantly ask, "What can I get?" the practice of dana retrains the heart to ask, "What can I give?" This is a radical shift in orientation. Giving is the direct antidote to clinging. When we give freely, without expecting anything in return, we are actively breaking the spell of the ego's grasping. We are affirming our connection to others and acknowledging that our well-being is intertwined. The joy that comes from giving is often a surprise. It is a warm, clean, and expansive feeling that is far more lasting than the fleeting thrill of acquisition. It reminds us of our own abundance. Even when we feel we have very little in a material sense, we can always be generous. We can offer our time, our full attention, in a conversation, a helping hand, a kind word, or a simple smile. The practice of dana is not about the size of the gift. It is about the quality of the heart that gives. It is the intention to share, to support, and to contribute to the well-being of the world. There is a beautiful story that illustrates how the joy of giving can eclipse the pleasure of owning. In the time of the Buddha, there was a phenomenally wealthy and kind-hearted merchant named Sudatta. He was so renowned for his generosity to the poor and needy that he was given the honorary name Anathapindika, which means the feeder of the destitute. Upon meeting the Buddha for the first time, Anathapindika was so moved by the wisdom of the teachings that he immediately wanted to build a monastery where the Buddha and his community of monks could reside. He found a beautiful, tranquil grove on the outskirts of the city, but it belonged to a prince named Jeta. Unwilling to sell, the prince jokingly told Anathapindika that he would only sell the land for the price it would take to cover the entire grove with gold coins laid edge to edge. To the prince's utter astonishment, Anathapindika took him seriously. He agreed to the price and immediately ordered his servants to bring carts filled with his vast fortune of gold coins. He then began, piece by piece, to pave the earth of the grove with pure gold. As Prince Jeta watched this incredible scene unfold, he was deeply moved. He realized that the teachings Anathapindika sought to support must be of unimaginable value for a man to so freely give away a fortune that others would kill for. Before the grove was even half covered, the prince stopped him and said, "This is enough. The land is yours. Allow me to offer my own gift. I will donate the trees of this grove." Together, they built the famous Jeta's Grove Monastery, a place where the Buddha would give many of his most important teachings. Anathapindika, a man who had everything that material wealth could buy, discovered a source of joy in this act of generosity that far surpassed anything his riches had ever given him. His greatest happiness was not found in what he owned, but in what he could give away for the benefit of all. This is the shift in perspective that frees us from the treadmill of materialism. It is the realization that a life dedicated to accumulation is a life spent in a state of perpetual lack. It is the discovery that true wealth is a heart that is content with what it has and generous with the abundance it finds. When we stop our frantic search for something more, we finally have the space to bring a sense of purpose and presence to the life we already have. including the work we do every day. Having discovered the wellspring of richness within the present moment and the quiet contentment that lies beyond the frantic pursuit of materialism, we now turn our attention to the arena where most of us spend the majority of our waking lives. It is the place of our greatest efforts, our highest ambitions, and often our most profound stress. It is the world of our work. For many, the workplace is a battlefield. It is a place of deadlines, pressure, competition, and conflict. We learn to armor our hearts, to put on a professional mask, and to push ourselves to the point of exhaustion, believing this is the only way to survive and succeed. But this path offers a revolutionary proposition, that our work does not have to be a source of suffering. In fact, our workplace can become our monastery. Our desk can be our meditation cushion. Our daily tasks can be our practice. We can transform our work from a place where we lose ourselves into a place where we find ourselves. This transformation begins with a foundational principle of the Buddhist path, known as Samma Ajiva, or right livelihood. This is one of the pillars of the Noble Eightfold Path, and it invites us to look deeply at the nature of our work and its impact on the world. At its most basic level, right livelihood means choosing a profession that does not cause harm to ourselves or to other living beings. The traditional texts are clear. One should avoid work that involves dealing in weapons, in poisons, in intoxicants, or in the exploitation of humans or animals. In our complex modern world, this principle invites an even deeper inquiry. We can ask ourselves, does my work contribute to the well-being or the suffering of the world? Does my company's mission align with my own deepest values? Does our work prey on human weakness, fuel addiction, or damage the planet? Or does it, in some way, alleviate suffering, create beauty, foster connection, or support life? These are not easy questions, and for many people, the luxury of choosing a perfect, ethically aligned job is not a reality. We have bills to pay and families to support. But even in this situation, the principle of right livelihood can be practiced through the cultivation of right intention. Even if our job is not our passion, even if the company we work for is not perfect, we can still make the conscious choice to bring our own integrity to the work we do. We can choose to be honest in our dealings. We can choose to be a source of kindness and support for our colleagues. We can perform our tasks with care and diligence, finding a sense of dignity in doing our work well. We can transform our work not by changing the job title, but by changing the quality of heart and mind we bring to the job itself. We can decide that our work, whatever it is, will be a vehicle for our practice of mindfulness and compassion. With this foundation of intention, we can then begin to apply specific, practical tools to revolutionize our experience of the workday. The first and most powerful tool involves dismantling one of the most cherished myths of modern productivity, the myth of multitasking. We have been taught to believe that the ability to juggle multiple tasks at once is a sign of efficiency and skill. We take pride in answering emails while on a conference call, while simultaneously planning our next project. The truth, however, as both ancient wisdom and modern neuroscience confirm, is that multitasking is a fiction. The human brain cannot focus on two complex tasks at once. What we are actually doing is rapid, frantic task switching. Every time we switch from the email to the phone call, our brain has to disengage from one context and re-engage with another. And this switching comes at a tremendous cognitive cost. It depletes our mental energy, increases the production of stress hormones like cortisol, leads to a higher rate of errors, and results in work that is shallow and fragmented. Multitasking is not a skill. It is a recipe for stress and mediocrity. The antidote is the simple, profound practice of single tasking or monotasking. This means bringing our full, undivided attention to one and only one task at a time. When you are writing a report, just write the report. Close the other tabs on your browser. Put your phone on silent and out of sight. When you are on a phone call, just be on the phone call. Listen deeply. Don't dawdle. Don't type. Just listen. This practice of bringing your whole mind to a single object of attention is a form of meditation. At first, it can feel strange, as the mind, addicted to distraction, will want to jump away. But with practice, something remarkable happens. You enter a state of deep focus, often called a flow state. The sense of time can fall away. The inner critic grows quiet. You become completely absorbed in the task at hand, and your work becomes more creative, more efficient, and of a much higher quality. More importantly, this way of working is deeply calming. There is a profound sense of peace and satisfaction that comes from doing one thing at a time and doing it well. Of course, a modern workday is often filled with interruptions and demands that make long periods of single tasking difficult. This is why we must learn to weave mindfulness into the very fabric of the day through a series of micro-practices. These are small, intentional pauses that can be done anywhere, anytime, to bring us back to the present moment and reset our nervous system. For instance, you can create a practice of the mindful arrival. When you get to your desk in the morning, before you turn on your computer and plunge into the flood of emails, take just 1 minute, sit quietly, and take 3 deep, conscious breaths. Feel your feet on the floor. Notice the sounds in the room. Set an intention for your day, perhaps to be present or to be kind. This small ritual creates a buffer of calm before the chaos begins. You can also practice mindful transitions. We spend a lot of time moving between tasks, between meetings, between our desk and the coffee machine. We usually fill this time with more mental chatter. Instead, you can use this transition time as a mini walking meditation. As you walk down the hallway, feel the sensation of your feet on the ground. Notice the movement of your body. You are not just going to a meeting, you are arriving with every step. You can also use recurring events as a cue for mindfulness. Let the ringing of your phone be a reminder. Before you answer, take 1 conscious breath. Let the act of hitting the send button on an email be a reminder. Take 1 conscious breath as you do. These are not about adding more to your to-do list. They are about puncturing the relentless momentum of your day with tiny moments of presence, tiny moments of peace. Finally, we bring this mindfulness to the most complex part of our work, our relationships with our colleagues. We can use the principles of deep listening and loving speech to transform our interactions. In a stressful meeting, when tensions are high, we can practice listening to our colleagues, not to refute them, but to truly understand their perspective. We can listen for the stress or fear behind their words. When giving feedback, we can do so with kindness and a genuine desire to help the other person grow, rather than with criticism. When receiving feedback, we can practice listening without defensiveness, seeing the information as a gift that can help us improve, rather than as a personal attack on our ego. We can even learn to work with the difficult colleague, the person who seems to push all our buttons. Instead of seeing them as an adversary, we can try to see them with the eyes of compassion. We can wonder, what suffering might be causing this person to act in this way? What stress are they under? This doesn't mean we condone their behavior, but it stops us from taking it so personally. It creates an inner space that protects our own peace. This practice of bringing compassion and equanimity into our professional relationships, is what truly creates a humane and thriving workplace culture. The story of the harried woodcutter perfectly captures the essence of this entire approach. A traveler came upon a woodcutter in the forest who was frantically trying to saw down a large tree. The man was sweating, grunting, and panting with exhaustion, yet the saw was barely making a mark on the trunk. The traveler watched for a while and then said, "Excuse me, sir, but I can see you are working very hard, but your saw seems to be quite dull. If you were to stop for a little while and sharpen it, your work would go much faster." The woodcutter, annoyed at the interruption, wiped the sweat from his brow and replied, "Don't you see I'm too busy? I have to get this tree cut down. I don't have time to stop and sharpen my axe." We are that woodcutter. Our mind is our axe. We rush through our days with a scattered, stressed, and dull mind, believing we are too busy to stop, too busy to pause, too busy to meditate. We think our mindfulness practice is something separate from our work, something we do if we have extra time. But this story teaches us the truth. The practice of mindfulness, the moments we take to be still, to breathe, to calm and center our minds, is the act of sharpening the axe. It is not taking time away from our work. It is the most essential and productive part of our work. By bringing this wisdom to our livelihood, we do more than just manage our stress. We transform our work from a daily grind into a daily practice, a path for cultivating presence, purpose, and a deep and abiding peace. Having learned to bring mindfulness into the rhythms of our daily life and the challenges of our work, we have built a foundation of presence and peace. We have cultivated a heart that is more compassionate, balanced, and content. Now, with this foundation firmly established, we are invited to turn our gentle, unwavering attention to the one great truth that underlies all of human existence, the truth that our modern culture is most dedicated to avoiding. It is the truth of our own mortality. In the West, death is treated as a taboo subject, a grim secret to be hidden away, a medical failure to be denied. We speak of it in hushed tones and gentle euphemisms. We wage a relentless war against the signs of our own aging, desperate to maintain the illusion of perpetual youth. We see the contemplation of death as morbid, depressing, a path to despair. But this spiritual path offers a perspective that is profoundly different and radically life-affirming. It teaches that the mindful and regular contemplation of our own death, a practice known as maranasati, is not a path to despair, but a direct gateway to a life of profound meaning, joy, and purpose. Our avoidance of death does not make it go away. It simply gives it a terrifying power over us. It becomes the monster in the closet, the source of a deep, unnamed anxiety that hums just beneath the surface of our lives. We are haunted by a fear we refuse to name. The practice of maranasati is the simple, courageous act of opening the closet door, turning on the light, and making friends with what we find inside. In doing so, we discover that what we feared was a monster is, in fact, our greatest teacher. The contemplation of mortality is not complex. It rests on the clear seeing of two simple, undeniable facts. The first is, my death is certain. This is not a belief or a philosophy. It is a biological reality. Every single being that has ever been born has died or will die. The greatest kings, the most brilliant artists, the most powerful innovators, the most beloved saints, they all share this common destiny. To contemplate this fact is not to be pessimistic, it is to be realistic. It connects us to the great, flowing river of life and dissolves our illusion of separateness. It is the ultimate equalizer, the ultimate ground of our shared humanity. To truly know, in our bones, that our time here is finite, is to awaken from the dream of our own specialness and to enter into a humble and profound solidarity with all of life. The second fact we contemplate is this: the time of my death is uncertain. While the fact of our death is an absolute certainty, its timing is a complete mystery. We live our lives with the implicit assumption that we have an endless supply of tomorrows. We create 5-year plans and 10-year plans, believing we are guaranteed the time to see them through. But a single moment, a single unforeseen event, a sudden illness, or an accident can change everything. The practice of Maranasati asks us to gently hold this uncertainty in our awareness, not to create fear, but to create urgency, not to paralyze us, but to awaken us. We may have 50 years left, or we may have 5 minutes. We simply do not know. To live with this gentle awareness of uncertainty is to understand the infinite preciousness of the present moment. It is to realize that this day, this hour, this very breath might be our last. And this realization has the power to utterly transform our lives. When we begin to live with this dual awareness, the certainty of death and the uncertainty of its timing, something miraculous happens. It acts as a great, clarifying fire, burning away all that is trivial, all that is inessential in our lives. Think of the things that occupy your mind on a daily basis, the small worries, the petty grudges, the anxieties about your reputation, the desperate need to be right in an argument. Now, hold those concerns up to the reality of your own death, in the vast silent presence of your mortality. How important do they seem? The argument with your partner, the comment from your boss, the scratch on your new car all shrink to their true, insignificant size. What remains after the fire of this contemplation has burned away, the non-essentials, is what truly matters. It is the quality of our love. It is the depth of our connection with others. It is the kindness we have shown. It is the peace we have cultivated in our own hearts. Death awareness is the ultimate tool for reordering our priorities. It forces us to distinguish between what is merely urgent and what is truly important. It moves us to finally make that phone call to a friend we have lost touch with, to forgive a family member for an old hurt, to speak the words of love that we so often leave unspoken, assuming there will always be a tomorrow. This practice is also the most powerful antidote to procrastination. We live our lives in a state of someday. Someday, I will start that creative project. Someday, I will learn to meditate. Someday, I will travel. Someday, I will live my real life. Death awareness gently but firmly tells us that someday is an illusion. The only time we have is now. To contemplate our mortality is to light a fire under our own lives, to motivate us to live our most authentic life today, not in some imaginary future. It is the call to stop waiting and to start living. Paradoxically, looking at death makes us feel more intensely alive. When we forget that our time is limited, we take life for granted. We sleepwalk through our days. We hardly taste our food. We barely see the beauty of the sky. We half listen to the people we love. But when we remember that every one of these experiences is a finite gift, they become luminous. The taste of a fresh strawberry becomes an explosion of sweetness. The beauty of a sunset becomes a breathtaking, heart-stopping masterpiece. The presence of a loved one becomes an infinitely precious treasure. We stop sleepwalking and we start paying attention. We begin to savor the extraordinary miracle of ordinary life. Of course, this contemplation can bring up fear. That is natural. The fear of death is often composed of two things: the fear of the unknown and the fear of having not truly lived. The practice of Maranasati addresses both. By looking at death directly, by making it a familiar object of our contemplation, we slowly rob it of its terrifying, monstrous quality. We are making friends with the inevitable, and by allowing this contemplation to inspire us to live more fully, more lovingly, and more authentically now, we address the deeper fear. We reduce the possibility of arriving at the end of our lives filled with regret for a life unlived. We can meet our end with a sense of peace, knowing that we truly lived the life we were given. From the Buddhist perspective, this is further softened by the view that death is not a final annihilation, but a profound transition. A cloud is never born and never dies. It is simply water, changing form. It becomes rain. It joins a river. It flows to the ocean. It evaporates into the sky, and it becomes a cloud again. Its form is impermanent, but its essence is continuous. In the same way, this path teaches that our life is a stream of causes and effects, and that death is simply a great change, not a final end. There is no more powerful story about this truth than that of Alexander the Great, the man who had conquered almost the entire known world. As he lay on his deathbed, surrounded by his weeping generals, he knew that all his power, all his armies, and all his wealth were now useless. He gave 3 final commands for his funeral. First, he ordered that his coffin was to be carried only by his most eminent physicians. He did this to show the world that in the face of death, even the most skilled doctors are powerless. Second, he commanded that the path from his palace to his tomb was to be scattered with the gold, silver, and precious jewels from his treasury. He did this to show that not a single piece of the material wealth he had spent his life accumulating could be taken with him. His third and final command was the most poignant. He ordered that his hands were to be left dangling outside the coffin, open and empty, for all to see. When his astonished generals asked why, he explained, "I want the world to know that I, Alexander the Great, came into this world with empty hands, and I am leaving this world with empty hands." The most powerful man on earth, the ultimate conqueror, wanted his final lesson to be one of utter humility and the wisdom of letting go. He had gained the whole world, only to realize at the end that what truly mattered could not be held in one's hand. By making friends with our mortality, we learn this lesson not at the end of our life, but at the beginning of our true one. We are not just preparing for a good death, we are finally learning how to have a good life. And this profound acceptance of our own place within the great, changing mystery of existence leads us to an even deeper insight, the realization of our absolute connection to everything that is. Having made peace with our own mortality, we begin to sense our place not as isolated individuals, but as members of the great, flowing stream of all life. This recognition of our shared fate opens the door to one of the most profound, beautiful, and transformative insights of the Buddhist path. It is the master key that unlocks the nature of reality itself. It is the teaching that underlies both impermanence and no-self. It is the doctrine of Praticca Samutpada, a Sanskrit term that can be translated as interdependence or dependent origination. It is the simple yet world-changing realization that nothing exists in isolation. Everything arises in dependence upon other factors. Nothing has a separate, independent existence. Everything, in the words of the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, is. From the moment we learn to speak, we are taught to see the world as a collection of separate nouns. Here am I. Over there is a tree. On the table is a cup. In the sky is the sun. This way of seeing is useful for navigating our daily lives, but it is a profound illusion. It carves the seamless, unified reality into a collection of discrete, disconnected objects. This illusion of separateness is the root of so much of our suffering. When we feel separate, we feel lonely. When we feel separate, we feel we are in competition with others. When we feel separate, we believe we can harm another being or damage our environment without harming ourselves. The wisdom of interdependence dismantles this illusion completely. It reveals that the entire universe is a single, intricate, and seamless web of relationships, and we are not a spider sitting on top of the web. We are the web. To grasp this truth not just as an idea, but as a felt reality, let us engage in a simple contemplation. Take an ordinary object, something as simple as a single sheet of paper. Let us look deeply at this sheet of paper. Our conventional mind sees it as a separate, self-contained thing. But with the eyes of interdependence, we see something very different. We ask, what had to happen for this sheet of paper to exist? And we see, quite clearly, a cloud floating in this sheet of paper. Without a cloud, there is no rain. Without rain, the trees cannot grow. So the cloud is in the paper. And if we look more closely, we see the sunshine. The sun's light and warmth are essential for the tree to engage in photosynthesis, to transform water and carbon dioxide into wood. So the sun is also in this sheet of paper. Then, of course, we see the tree itself, the forest from which it came, the earth that nourished its roots. And we see the logger who cut down the tree. We see his parents who gave him life. We see the wheat in the field that became the bread he ate for breakfast, which gave him the energy to do his work. We see the farmer who grew the wheat and the baker who baked the bread. They are all, in some way, present in this simple sheet of paper. Then we see the people who worked in the paper mill, the engineers who designed the machinery, the miners who dug the iron ore from the earth to build that machinery. We see the truck driver who transported the paper, the gasoline in his truck that came from ancient decayed organisms deep within the earth. We see the person who sold us the paper. We see our own teachers who taught us how to read and write, without whom this paper would have no meaning for us. If we continue to look in this way, we will see that the entire cosmos, in all of its complexity and history, has conspired to bring this single sheet of paper into existence in this present moment. If we were to take away just one of these elements, if we take away the sun, or the cloud, or the logger, or the wheat farmer, this sheet of paper could not be. It has no separate, independent self. Its entire existence is dependent on the existence of everything else. It is empty of a separate self, but it is full of the entire universe. It does not exist. It interexists. Now, let us turn this powerful lens of contemplation upon ourselves. Just like the sheet of paper, we often believe we are a separate self, an independent entity. But when we look deeply, we see that this self is also empty of any separate existence. The food on our plate this morning connects us to the farmer, the truck driver, the grocer, the sun, the rain, the soil. The clothes on our back connect us to the cotton farmer, the factory worker, the designer, the ship captain who brought them across the ocean. The air we are breathing in this very moment connects us to the trees and the plankton in the sea that produce the oxygen. Our thoughts, our ideas, our language, our values, none of them are originally ours. They are inherited from our parents, our teachers, our culture, our friends, and the countless generations that came before us. When we see this truth, the hard, rigid boundary between self and other begins to dissolve. We realize that our well-being is not a private affair. It is inextricably linked to the well-being of all the beings and all the conditions that support our existence. This understanding is the true foundation of ethics and responsibility. The law of karma is not a mystical system of reward and punishment meted out by some cosmic judge. It is the natural, impersonal law of cause and effect operating within an interconnected web. When we drop a pebble into a pond, the ripples spread out and affect the entire pond. In the same way, every action we take, every word we speak, every thought we think, is a pebble dropped into the pond of reality. It sends out ripples that affect the entire web, and those ripples eventually find their way back to us. To harm another being is, in a very real sense, to harm ourselves. To pollute a river is to pollute our own extended body. To act with kindness and generosity is to create conditions of kindness and generosity that will inevitably nourish us in return. There is no escape from our connection. This vision of radical interdependence also cultivates a profound sense of gratitude. When we see the countless beings and conditions that have to come together for us to experience even a single moment of life, a feeling of deep humility and thankfulness naturally arises. We feel grateful for the food we eat, for the roof over our head, for the clean water we drink, for the people who love us. We stop taking our life for granted. This sense of gratitude is a powerful antidote to the poisons of entitlement, arrogance, and complaint. We see that our life is not something we have earned, but an incredible gift, woven from the fabric of the entire universe. This gives rise to a new and sacred ecology. We no longer see the natural world as a collection of resources to be exploited for our own gain. We see the forest, the ocean, the atmosphere, and the animals as our kin, as integral parts of our own being. The earth is not our mother in some sentimental, poetic sense. In a very real, physical sense, the earth is our body, her water is our blood, her air is our breath, her food is our flesh. To poison the earth is, quite literally, to poison ourselves. Interdependence provides the most profound spiritual foundation for environmental responsibility, a responsibility born not of fear or guilt, but of a deep and abiding love for the whole of which we are a part. There is a sublime and beautiful image from the Buddhist tradition that captures this vision of reality perfectly. It is the image of Indra's net. Imagine a vast, cosmic net that stretches out infinitely in all directions. At every single node, where the threads of the net cross, there hangs a single, perfectly polished, multifaceted jewel. The net is structured in such a way that if you look closely at the surface of any one jewel, you will see in it the shimmering reflections of every other jewel in the entire net. And if you look even more closely into any one of those reflections, you will see again the reflections of all the other jewels, and so on, ad infinitum. Each jewel is an individual, yet it contains the whole. The whole is present in every individual part. This is a perfect metaphor for the universe. Each of us, each being, each atom, each moment is one of these jewels. We are distinct, yet we contain and reflect every other part of reality. Your joy is reflected in me. My sorrow is reflected in you. The health of the forest is reflected in the health of my body. My actions are reflected in the well-being of the entire planet. There is no true separation. There is only a beautiful, intricate, and sacred dance of mutual reflection. To see the world in this way is to transform it. The world ceases to be a cold, random collection of competing entities. It becomes a single, living, breathing organism, a luminous web of belonging. And this vision of the profound wholeness and interconnection of all things leads us to the final, most subtle insight of our journey, the liberating wisdom of what the tradition calls emptiness. Our journey has brought us to a profound and beautiful precipice. We began by seeing that all things are impermanent, a great, flowing river of change. We then saw that within this river, there is no solid, separate self to be found. And finally, we saw that everything in this river arises in a vast, intricate web of interdependence. The flower contains the sun and the rain. Our body contains the entire history of the cosmos. This leads us to a final, definitive, and liberating question. If everything is impermanent, selfless, and interdependent, what then is its ultimate nature? The answer to this question is the pinnacle of Buddhist wisdom, a truth so profound it has the power to untie the deepest knots of our suffering. It is the teaching of sunyata, or emptiness. Now, the word emptiness can sound frightening to the Western ear. It conjures images of a cold, dark void, a nihilistic nothingness, a terrifying abyss of meaninglessness. But in this tradition, sunyata means the very opposite. It is not a bleak negation of life. It is the key to its infinite potential. To understand this, we must realize that emptiness does not mean non-existence. It means empty of a separate, independent, and permanent self-nature. It is not a void. It is a spaciousness, a radical openness, a boundless potentiality. Think of a simple clay cup. What makes the cup useful? It is its form, its solid walls, but it is also the emptiness inside. Without that empty space, it could not hold water. Its usefulness is born from the union of its form and its emptiness. In the same way, a room is useful not because of its walls, but because of the empty space the walls enclose. Emptiness is not a lack. It is the space in which everything can happen. The most famous and concise teaching on this subject comes from a scripture called the Heart Sutra, which declares, "Form is emptiness, emptiness is form." This short phrase is a perfect encapsulation of the nature of reality. Let us unpack it. The first part, form is emptiness, points to the truth we have already explored. When we look deeply at any form, a tree, a cloud, our own body, a thought, we see that it has no independent self. We see that it is a temporary manifestation of countless interdependent causes and conditions. The sheet of paper we saw is empty of a separate self, but full of the sun, the cloud, and the logger. Therefore, its very form is its emptiness of a separate self. To see the form deeply is to see its lack of solid, independent existence. The second part, emptiness is form, is even more profound. It tells us that this emptiness is not a blank nothingness that exists somewhere else, separate from our world of shapes and colors. Emptiness is the very potential that allows form to appear. Because things are empty of a fixed, rigid, unchanging nature, they are free to arise, to change, to interact, to grow, and to decay. If a seed were not empty of a fixed seed nature, it could never transform into a tree. If a child were not empty of a fixed child nature, they could never grow into an adult. Emptiness is the dynamic, creative, and limitless space of possibility from which all of life's wondrous forms emerge. It is like the empty, white screen in a cinema. The emptiness of the screen is what allows any and every movie to be projected upon it. Emptiness is not the absence of the movie. It is the very condition for its appearance. To make this more tangible, let us consider the beautiful analogy of a wave on the ocean. A wave has a clear form. It has a beginning, it rises to a peak, and it subsides. It is a distinct event. That is its form. But what is the wave? If we look deeply, we see that the wave is made of water. There is no point at which you can separate the wave from the water. You cannot take the wave out of the ocean and put it on the sand. The wave is a temporary expression of the water. In this sense, the wave is empty of any separate, independent wave self. Its form is entirely dependent on the water. So, form, the wave, is emptiness of a separate self. At the same time, the very nature of water is to be formless and fluid. Its emptiness of a fixed shape is what allows it to rise up and manifest as a wave. So, emptiness, the water's potential, is form, the wave. The wave and the water, form and emptiness, are not two separate things. They are two inseparable dimensions of a single reality. The entire universe, with all its galaxies, stars, forests, and beings, is just like this. It is a vast, magical, and ever-changing display of waves on the great ocean of being. To see the world in this way is to be liberated from the deepest sources of our suffering, because our suffering comes from taking forms to be solid, separate, and permanent. When we understand the emptiness of all things, we are freed from the tyranny of our own rigid concepts. We live in a world of labels: success, failure, good, bad, friend, enemy. We treat these labels as if they are solid realities, and they cause us immense pain. We are crushed by failure. We grasp at success. But when we see that these concepts are empty of any inherent, ultimate meaning, they lose their power to bind us. A failure is no longer a permanent stain on our character. It is simply a conditioned event, a wave that has risen and subsided. It is feedback. It is a teacher. We can learn from it and move on, without being defined by it. The same is true for all our labels. They are useful conventions, but when we cling to them as ultimate truths, we create a prison for ourselves. Seeing their emptiness is finding the key to that prison door. This understanding also dissolves our deepest fears, especially the fear of death. The fear of death is rooted in the belief that we are a solid, separate self that will be annihilated. We cling to this self, this precious form, terrified of its disappearance. But the wisdom of emptiness reveals that there was no solid, separate self to begin with. What we call me is a process, a continuous stream of thoughts, feelings, and sensations, a temporary wave on the ocean. When the wave subsides back into the ocean, is it destroyed? No, the water is still there. Nothing of substance is lost. To see our own empty nature is to realize that we are not the wave, we are the ocean. This does not mean our individual life is not precious. It is infinitely precious, precisely because it is a unique and unrepeatable expression of the whole. But the terror of absolute annihilation begins to fade, replaced by a deep trust in the ongoing process of life. Most beautifully, the realization of emptiness gives birth to a boundless and spontaneous compassion. As long as we believe in a solid me and a solid you, our compassion will always be limited. It will be an act of a separate self, trying to help another separate self. But when the walls of separation dissolve in the light of emptiness, something incredible happens. There is no longer a helper, a person being helped, and an act of helping. There is just the ocean responding to itself. There is just life moving to alleviate the suffering of life. The suffering of another is no longer their suffering. It is simply suffering, arising in the seamless web of being. And the compassionate response arises naturally, effortlessly, without the need for conscious thought. This is the heart of the Bodhisattva, the awakened being who, seeing the empty nature of all things, dedicates their life to the well-being of all. Finally, emptiness is not a denial of life. It is the ultimate affirmation of it. It is the source of all creativity, all change, all possibility. If things were not empty, if they were solid and fixed, nothing could ever happen. A seed would be a seed forever. A caterpillar could never become a butterfly. The world would be a static, frozen museum. It is because all things are empty of a fixed nature that they are free to dance, to interact, to transform. Emptiness is the ultimate freedom, the open space that allows the symphony of the universe to be played. We have now seen how the great insights of this path are woven together. We see that things are impermanent, constantly changing. We look deeper and see that they have no separate self. We look deeper still and see that they arise through a web of interdependence. And when we look to the ultimate nature of this entire impermanent, selfless, interdependent display, we see that it is all woven from the luminous, creative, and liberating fabric of emptiness. To see this is not to negate the world, but to see it for the first time in all its magical, dreamlike beauty. It is to finally be free from our struggle against reality and to learn to dance with it. And with this profound vision as our ground, we can now ask the final question of our journey: how then shall we live? We have traveled together on a long and profound journey. We began in the familiar territory of the restless mind, in the quiet desperation of 3 in the morning, feeling the weight of a world that is too loud, too fast, and too demanding. From that place of dissatisfaction, the valley of dukkha, we began to walk a path of inquiry. We followed the river of our suffering back to its source and discovered it was fed by the relentless thirst of our own clinging mind, the force of tanha. We looked deeply into the nature of the reality we were clinging to and saw that it was a great, flowing river of impermanence, anicca, and that within this river there was no solid, unchanging self to be found, the truth of anatta. This initial diagnosis could have led to despair, but instead, it opened a path of practice. We discovered the simple, life-saving anchor of our own breath, a home base in the present moment we can return to at any time. From this stability, we learned to watch the clouds of our thoughts and the weather of our emotions, not as a victim caught in the storm, but as the calm, spacious sky that holds them all. We learned to practice the alchemy of the heart through rain, transforming the lead of our pain into the gold of our own compassion. We then planted the seeds of this compassion in the soil of our own being, learning to offer ourselves the unconditional friendship we so desperately need. From that wellspring of self-compassion, we expanded the circle of our kindness, metta, to embrace all of life, dissolving the walls between self and other. With a heart trained in kindness, we turned to our interactions, learning the sacred arts of deep listening and loving speech, transforming our relationships from battlefields into gardens. We nurtured the 4 divine abodes, cultivating a heart that is boundless in its love, its compassion, its joy, and its unshakable equanimity. We learned the quiet courage of letting go, releasing the burdens of the past and future, so that we could finally arrive in the precious, living reality of the now. This presence allowed us to see beyond the empty promises of materialism and to bring a new sense of purpose to our daily work. We even dared to turn and face the great taboo of our mortality, and in making friends with death, we discovered the secret to a truly vibrant life. Finally, our journey led us to the summit of wisdom, where the illusion of our separateness dissolved completely. We saw that all of life is a single, sacred web of interdependence, and that the ultimate nature of this seamless, dreamlike reality is a luminous, creative, and liberating emptiness. And so, here we stand. Having taken this journey, having seen this vast and beautiful landscape of the mind, the final and most important question arises: how then shall we live? What do we do with these insights? This is the point where our journey truly begins. For the goal of this path was never to arrive at a final destination, a perfect state of bliss where life's problems cease to exist. The goal is to learn how to walk the path of your own ordinary life with an extraordinary quality of awareness, wisdom, and love. This is the practice of living an awakened life. The first and most important thing to understand is that you do not need to change the circumstances of your life to walk this path. You do not need to move to a monastery in the mountains. You do not need to renounce your job, your family, or your passions. In fact, these very things, which are so often the source of our stress, are the most fertile ground for our practice. Your family is your monastery. Your workplace is your dojo. The traffic jam, the difficult conversation, the crying child, these are not interruptions to your practice. These are your practice. The path is not an escape from life. It is a courageous turning towards life, a way to engage with it more fully, more deeply, and more peacefully than ever before. To support this engagement, it is wise to create a gentle structure, a personal rhythm of practice that nourishes and sustains you. This structure can be seen as having three essential pillars. The first is a period of formal practice. This is the act of setting aside a small amount of time each day, perhaps just 10 or 15 minutes in the morning, to sit in stillness. This is your laboratory. This is where you sharpen the axe. It is the time when you consciously cultivate your attention, anchoring it to the breath, observing the mind, and planting the seeds of loving kindness in a relatively controlled environment. Consistency is far more important than duration. 10 minutes every single day will transform your mind far more effectively than 2 hours once a month. This daily appointment with yourself is a profound act of self-care. It stabilizes the mind and fills your cup so that you have something to offer the rest of your day. The second pillar is informal practice. This is the art of taking the mindfulness you cultivate on the cushion and weaving it into the fabric of your day. This is where the real transformation occurs. It is the practice of choosing one activity a day to do with your full, undivided attention. It might be drinking your morning coffee with the full spectrum of your senses. It might be taking a short walk on your lunch break, feeling your feet on the ground. It might be listening to your partner at the end of the day with the fullness of your heart, without interrupting. It is looking for small moments to come back home to the breath, to reality. These informal moments are what bridge the gap between your meditation practice and your life. They ensure that mindfulness is not just something you do, but something you are. The third pillar is study and contemplation. The journey of awakening is long, and it is helpful to have maps and companions. This pillar is about nourishing your mind and inspiring your heart. It can mean reading the words of wise teachers, listening to talks that clarify the path, or simply reflecting on the teachings we have explored here. It can also mean finding a community, a sangha, of like-minded friends who are also on this path. Walking this path with others provides support, encouragement, and the invaluable reminder that we are not alone. These three pillars, formal sitting, informal practice, and nourishing study, create a balanced and sustainable way to integrate this wisdom into a busy, modern life. As you begin to walk this path in your own way, it is crucial to hold the right spirit, the right attitude towards your practice. The most important of these is to let go of the idea of linear progress. We have a deeply conditioned idea that if we are doing something right, we should be constantly getting better and better. But the spiritual path is not a straight line upwards. It is more like a spiral. We will find ourselves circling back to the same issues again and again, the same patterns of anger, the same anxieties, the same insecurities. But if we are practicing, we will notice that each time we meet them, we do so from a slightly higher vantage point. We meet them with a little more awareness, a little more wisdom, a little more compassion. There will be days of great clarity and peace, and there will be days of confusion and struggle. This is all part of the path. The goal is not to have only good days, but to learn to be present and kind with ourselves on all days. This is why self-compassion is the single most important quality to cultivate on the journey. You will forget. You will get lost in thought. You will react from old habits. You will fall. The practice is not about never falling. The practice is about how gently, how kindly, and how quickly you pick yourself back up, without judgment, and begin again. Every single breath is a new opportunity to begin again. There is a famous Zen story that beautifully captures the fruit of this entire journey. A young, eager student approaches a wise old Zen master and asks him, "Master, what did you do before you were enlightened?" The master thinks for a moment and replies, "Before I was enlightened, I chopped wood and I carried water." The student, expecting a more dramatic answer, is a little disappointed, but he presses on. "And what do you do now, master, after you have achieved enlightenment?" The master smiles gently and replies, "Now that I am enlightened, I chop wood and I carry water." And this is the great secret. The goal of this path is not to transcend our ordinary lives. It is not to achieve a state of permanent bliss, where we no longer have to deal with the practicalities of being human. The goal is to bring a transformed consciousness to the very same life we are already living. Before enlightenment, we chop the wood of our daily tasks with a mind that is scattered, resentful, and lost in thought. We carry the water of our relationships with a heart that is armored, anxious, and fearful. After awakening, we engage in the very same activities. We still have to work, to wash the dishes, to pay the bills, to care for our families. But we do so with a mind that is present, a heart that is open, and a spirit that is at peace. The outer circumstances may be the same, but the inner quality of our being is completely transformed. We find our liberation not by escaping the world, but by inhabiting it fully. The path does not end here. It begins now, with the simple, profound, and miraculous act of your very next breath. We began this journey together in the deep, quiet hours of the night, in that familiar solitude where the mind is often at its loudest, a storm of worries, plans, and regrets. We started with the honest recognition of a fundamental dis-ease, a sense of being overwhelmed by the relentless demands of the modern world. From that starting point, we have walked a long and winding path. We journeyed into the very nature of our own minds, discovering that the root of our suffering was not in our external circumstances, but in our own clinging and aversion. We learned to anchor ourselves in the present moment, using the simple gift of our breath. We learned to watch our thoughts and emotions with a wise and gentle detachment, becoming the calm sky rather than the passing storm. We cultivated the boundless qualities of the heart, learning to offer kindness to ourselves and to all of life. And we were led to a profound vision of reality, seeing the world not as a collection of separate things, but as a single, sacred, interconnected dance. If there is one essential truth to carry with you from this journey, let it be this: peace is not a destination you arrive at when all of your problems are solved. It is not the absence of noise, of difficulty, of pain. Peace is an inner refuge that you build, moment by moment, within your own heart and mind. It is the unwavering stability that comes from knowing how to be present with your life, exactly as it is. The wisdom of this path is like a gentle rain. It does not promise to stop the storms of life from ever happening again. Rather, it nourishes the soil of your being, so that when the storms do come, you have the strength, the flexibility, and the deep roots to withstand them without breaking. You learn to find the quiet center in the midst of the hurricane. This peace is your birthright. It is not something you need to acquire. It is something you need only uncover. And so, we leave you here, at the true beginning. You now have the map, you have the tools, and most importantly, you have the innate capacity to walk this path of awakening. You have everything you need. Know that this journey is not about becoming a perfect person, but about becoming a more fully, compassionately human one. There will be moments of forgetting, moments of falling back into old habits. Be patient with yourself. The practice is simply to begin again, with kindness, with your very next breath. The power to transform your life does not lie in some distant future or some grand gesture. It lies in the quiet, courageous choices you make in this very moment. The choice to be present, the choice to be kind, the choice to let go. Your journey of 1,000 miles begins not with a single step, but with a single conscious breath. It begins now.